Hello everyone, welcome into our latest live broadcast. It is the 22nd of July, it's Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And today, well, I wasn't quite sure if we were going to do a show today. So I was looking around at what we've got in the studio, what we could do. And it occurred to me I was going to update the firmware on the ASUS mesh routers. And these routers are a little different because, well, basically what ASUS did here, these are a couple years old. They decided that they would make a router that had the option to be put into mesh mode. So you could just buy this router, standard Wi-Fi router, or you could buy the mesh version, which was just two routers in one box. That's all it was. They're both exactly the same. And we wanted a third one since the house has 2 floors and it's pretty wide from side to side. So every one of these routers, if you look on the back, they're all identical. They will each operate as an independent Wi-Fi router. And they were very expensive individually. They were slightly discounted maybe by $100 in the kit of 2. But it was a sort of a cheap way to sell a mesh kit, was to just build the mesh option into the regular router and then say, okay, you know, if you want to buy the mesh kit, you just get 2 of the same router. And then you could always add more as you needed to. I don't know what the limit was, but usually 2 or 3 is pretty typical. But when you go to update the firmware on these, when it's in mesh mode, one unit is the master unit and the other units are sort of there as satellite units. And the master unit will update the firmware across the 3 of them. But I'm not going to set it up as a mesh system because I don't want to jeopardize the integrity of our wireless network here during the process. And to have 2 wireless networks competing is, well, it's not a good idea. So what I'm going to do is individually turn these on. And I'm sure there's a new firmware. There's got to be. We'll download the firmware and flash it. And then just repeat that 2 more times. And the routers will be just put into just router mode. But they're very easy to reconfigure to put them into mesh mode. Any one of them can be a satellite. Any one of them can be the master unit. So it's just going through the setup process again. Now, when and if we ever want to deploy these again, you know, we could decide to, let's say I bring on a new client and that client wants or needs better Wi-Fi throughout their building. I may sell this or offer this to them as a used unit if they're on a budget. Or I might have individual clients that each need a single wireless router for their small offices, in which case I could sell this 3 times to 3 different clients. They don't necessarily have to be tied together. So I've kept them in inventory because they're very good routers. They're not the best money can buy, but none of my clients are keeping up on top of their networking gear. As far as they're concerned, as long as their Wi-Fi works, as long as their network, you know, can transfer files, no one's measuring speed. Now, if it gets to a point where it seems like it's slower than normal, they'll call me, but they don't know what that is. It's something they feel. They go, wow, this seems like it's taken longer than it used to. Other than that, we don't change anything unless it needs to be changed. So welcome in, everybody. Let me remind you, our friends over at VIP-URCDKEYs offer discount license keys for Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office. They are who I use in my business. And I'll play this video for you here. That's a previous video we've done. And if you look underneath the video, and this goes for all of our live videos, you see this little box here? Just click where it says more. Those are the video notes. That contains all the links for everything we talk about in the video, the products, the websites, and the VIP-URCDKEY links. These are not affiliate links as far as, well, they are affiliate links, but they're not commission-based. So you don't have to use these links if you don't want to. They're just there to save you time. If we want to buy Windows 11 Pro, you know, there I clicked on the Windows 11 Pro link and then it brings up the page. Click Buy Now, and if you're not signed in, you need to sign in. It's free to create an account. You need to create an account in order for them to process your payment and email you your receipt and codes. So once you do that, if you put my name in on the promotion code area here, just put in the name Carey and then hit apply. Watch 25%. 1/4 of that price gets chopped right off. And then go ahead and submit your order. That's it. Even I pay the same price and use my own coupon code. I'm paying the same price you are in my business for my clients. Choose your payment method. There's all your options there, and then click Pay Now, and just follow the on-screen prompts for information as you would any online purchase. Nothing's any different. Within about 2 minutes, whether it's day or night, weekend or holiday, doesn't matter, you're going to get an email receipt along with a download link if you need it for the product, and the thing that you paid for, your license key. That is also stored in your purchase history. So if any point in the future you need your license key again, just sign back in and go look at your purchase history all the way to your very first purchase. Could be years and years and years of purchase history. Ask me how I know. But generally speaking, I mean, you shouldn't need the key more than once. If you do have a problem with the key, they have 24/7 text-based support. This is very convenient because they're in another country, and sometimes English can be a little difficult to understand if it's not their first language. It can be very heavily accented. So using text, it's so much simpler and clearer to communicate. And they're available 24/7 every day. If you have any problems, they will assist you. They will fix it for you. If for any reason they don't, you reach out to me directly, and I will. Because when I tell you about a product here that I am encouraging you to consider, I will personally back it up myself. When it comes to like mini PCs and things like that, I don't have that kind of a guarantee, quite frankly, because I can tell you whether or not I like it, right? That doesn't mean you're going to like it. But when it comes to the software, right, that's more universal. Everybody watching this channel has some interest in Windows and likely Office, so it's a very common thing that people ask for. And it's pretty unusual there's ever any problems, but if there is a problem, they always take care of it. And I just want you to know that if you're saying, yeah, but what if they don't? You come to me and I'll make sure it gets taken care of. And by the way, and if I find out a lot of people are starting to come to me with problems, I won't be endorsing them anymore, just so you know. Also, I get paid the same if you buy it or you don't buy it. Don't do it for me. I'm doing this for you. Okay, let's be clear. If you want to take advantage of it, the advantage is for you. I'm not getting any richer or any poorer because you decide to buy Windows from one place or another. If you want peace of mind, you want a legitimate key, and you want to do it the way I do it because I have to be held accountable for it to lawyers' offices, and you don't want to upset a lawyer with an illegal piece of software. That's the wrong customer to do that to. This is what I use, and that's how I buy it, and that's what I pay. So it's exactly the same for you guys, all right? And that's just a gift to the community. If the community wants to turn it away, again, turn it away. I'm just putting it out there to hopefully help some people out. Let me say hello to everybody, and a shout out and a thank you to our friend Buster out there in Edinburgh, Scotland, who sends us an Amazon gift card prior to the show starting in lieu of a super chat. Thank you, Buster, as always. He says he's going to catch up with us tomorrow. It's pretty late there in Scotland, and I imagine he's probably getting some rest. So thank you, my friend. Get your rest, and when you watch this tomorrow, hello from yesterday. Arnold Albert says hello. There's Montana and Robster joining us in the chat. Robster wants to know, is there any way to increase the speed of a Wi-Fi router? Well, it's sort of like trying to increase the speed of a car. At some point, an engine can only put out so many horsepower, and that's all. You need to go to a larger engine or a more efficient or turbocharged engine to get more power. So you can get more power out of a router by making sure that you're on a band that's not being used by any of your neighbors, right? So you're not competing for the airspace, the transmission. And you can make sure in some routers that if an option for transmit and receive power is there, some routers allow you to maximize that. However, in most cases, like if you were my customer and you were a business and you weren't messing around like some home user that's just bored, we don't play with this stuff. This is serious business. And we'd say it's time to get a new router. When you get a new router, the advertised speeds on the box are exactly the maximum speed that router can go. You don't need to watch YouTube review videos on routers. Seriously. The idea if you buy a name brand router anyway, like here we've got ASUS, but we've also got TP-Link and Netgear and other name brands, Ubiquiti. The speed that they say on the box, or if you're at Amazon or the manufacturer's website, they say this router can do this speed. That's the maximum speed under ideal circumstances. It will never go faster than that, never ever. And then the thing that you're connecting the router to, if it's wireless, has to be at the same level of wireless, because it's only going to run as slow as the slowest component. So if you have an older computer with older Wi-Fi, the new Wi-Fi is a waste of money for you. At least for that computer it is. Then you'd have to update that computer's Wi-Fi. And of course, if your internet speed is pretty slow, then upgrading your Wi-Fi only helps you with transferring files in the building. It won't make your internet any faster. To do that, you call the ISP, your internet service provider, and see what options they have available for you at what additional cost. But there will be additional cost for older computers. There will be additional cost for faster routers. Nobody is making you slower because you didn't click a button. There is no technology that works that way with computers. There are enough content creators here on YouTube that would have you believe that all of this old school nonsense would apply today, like adding more RAM makes a computer faster. Only under certain circumstances is that true. For most people, adding more RAM is simply taking money and flushing it down the toilet. Because if you're not using the RAM you have now, adding more of what you're not using doesn't make it run any faster. So there's a lot of common misconceptions, just fundamental basics that people don't understand. But in general, speed does not come for free. You do need to pay for it. And it's the same with a car. If you want to get 600 horsepower out of your 200 horsepower car, it can probably be done if you spend enough money. In the world of auto racing, if the owner or the driver says, how fast can we go? How fast can you make this car? There's one very simple answer. How much money do you want to spend? So even in drag racing, where these cars are hitting over 300 miles an hour in just seconds, they could go faster. The technology isn't the problem. The problem is they can only run those engines a couple times and then they have to tear them down and rebuild them again. And the more expensive the parts are, it's not like you're just going to use it once. Then you're going to keep reinvigorating that expense over and over and over again, repeating it. So it's a very expensive sport or hobby to race cars, especially drag cars. But you know, could be true of truck and tractor pulls and monster trucks too. Very, very, very expensive. It's pretty extreme. So the cheapest way, the most solid way for you to get the best performance, to get better performance out of your router, is to replace it. That would suggest to me that if you were happy with the router when you bought it, but you're not happy with it today, that's technology advancing. You've outgrown it. So it's nothing your wallet can't fix. But no, there's, generally speaking, aside from, you know, making sure you're not having interference and assuming the router is running at the advertised speed, that's all it can do. Period. End of story. Nothing else. That is the advertised rate, is the maximum rate in the best case scenario. It will never ever exceed that under any circumstance, with no exceptions. So if that's not good enough, it's time to upgrade. Okay, so I hope that answers that for you. Nobody is holding you back because you didn't click the mouse. The technology doesn't work like that. All right, let's see what else we have. Looking back to the chat room, Gary Tatum says hello. There's Mark Gaines and Sean Skinner joining us. Jim Kenny and, of course, Mara, our channel administrator, hanging out in there with you guys. Andy W6AD says hello. There's Terrell Cochran, Jonathan Fells, and Ben Laird. Ben joining us from Scotland. David Herzog says hello, along with Morton. Hello, Thomas. John Lewis from Brazil saying hello. Dazzle555 and Patrick Manny Bajan Guy all saying hello. We are live worldwide in 4K, broadcasting across the planet. While we're live, we love to interact with our viewers. If you're watching this live, you'll see a chat room with a little chat window. If you only see the chat room without the chat window, or if you look at the date and time and it's no longer Wednesday, the 22nd of July, you've missed this live video. But the good news is we broadcast this way 3 times a week, minimal, and minimum Friday, Sunday, and our members on Mondays, and hopefully on Wednesdays too. And catch us next time during our broadcast time, which is always 1:00 p.m. Pacific time. You can ask Google to convert it to your time zone anywhere in the world, and join us in the chat, because we have an amazing community here. And a lot of people that have never met each other from around the world are good friends who only see each other and hang out with each other here in our community. And you're welcome to join. Just be nice. Shouldn't have to say that, but it is the internet. All right, back over to the chat. John Williams says hello. And Jimmy Gray joining us from Barbados. Stephen Detroit says hello. And Laura the Bear joining us. Stevie Zundert says hello. Mustang Mike and Bike Man are joining us. Westside Lord says hello. And yeah, so today, this is kind of a weird, very high-end router. What I'm showing you today is a bit unusual, but it's not unusual for modern routers, especially more the high-end routers. There are some cheaper routers that do this too from TP-Link, have an option to mesh with other routers. And then on the other hand, companies like Netgear say, we don't mesh our routers. You either buy a router or you buy a mesh router. There's no changing your mind. That's kind of messed up for Netgear to do that. So that's why you don't see much Netgear products on my channel anymore. But companies like TP-Link and ASUS, for example, quite often offer the option to mesh the routers if you want to. TP-Link takes it a step further by allowing you to mesh with other compatibility standards, so it doesn't even have to be the same manufacturer. And in many cases, if it is the same manufacturer, it doesn't have to be the exact same router unless you want the exact same coverage. So if you just have a little corner somewhere and you just need a little bit of bandwidth, you could buy a cheaper router if the router manufacturer's router supports other models, which many of them do. But to make life so much simpler, just use the same router or just buy a system that's mesh. You'll know if it's mesh because it'll contain at least 2 boxes inside of it, and sometimes 3. You'll know what you're buying based on the price. These run about $800 a piece. That'll give you an idea of how much this was. And we used it for quite a long time. And then we outgrew it because we needed something for higher bandwidth. And we switched over from this to TP-Link. But we've always held on to this as an emergency backup. Just in case something goes wrong with the TP-Link and we need to replace it or return it, we still need to operate in the interim between diagnosing, shipping something back or ordering something new, and then waiting for the replacement product or the new product to arrive. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? That's why we've kept these. So they're not as good as, but they're better than nothing. And by the way, these were outstanding when they were introduced to the market. It's been a few years now. So what I'm going to do today is I brought out this little mini PC here, and we're going to connect the mini PC to the first router. So I've got a cable for that right here, and any of the ports in the back should be fine. And then the port that you would normally plug your internet source, your modem, that we're going to plug in from the TP-Link router as though it were a PC. And it gets a little confusing and it's a bit unusual, and I don't recommend you do this at home. But in order for me to demonstrate this live on YouTube, I can't use my router or it interrupts the signal when we reboot it and I go offline. So this is an unusual setup for demonstrative purposes only. So let me grab my Ethernet cable, and back on this router it says, I don't know, there's a white box right here, which I'm assuming is the WAN port. And then there's a physical on-off switch. You slide the switch up, and then a light comes on top, and it starts to boot. Now, I don't know the login for this router or the password, and I don't really care because I just want to boot them up as separate, have them reconfigured as just individual routers. And if we want to put it back into mesh mode, to mesh mode. In the mesh mode, we can obviously we can do that in the configuration. So to keep life simple, I don't want to hook all these up and set them up as a mesh. As I mentioned, it takes up a lot of air bandwidth, and it could conflict with my current system, which could make my video break up and lose connection by having too much interference. So we're just going to do one router in regular router mode, and then these two should go exactly the same way. In theory, should be exactly the same process. Now, the light on top kind of tells you what's going on with the router, and I don't know if it's supposed to be solid or blink. I can't remember. But here on the back of the router, there's a button that says reset. And lucky for me, it's not a pinhole. It's a recessed button, and I can't quite push it with my finger, which is a good idea, by the way, because sometimes people pick these up and move them, and if the button can be pressed in with a finger, they end up resetting their router, and they don't understand why, because they didn't realize when they picked it up, they were pressing the button in. On the other hand, the problem with the pinhole is a lot of people don't have something they can put in there. So a recessed button is, I think, a great design, and you can use something like a pen. And I think if I hold the reset button in, let's see if we see something happening on the top here. I'm going to push reset and hold it. Sometimes you'll hear a beep, other times you'll see the lights go off. And you can hold it up to usually 10 to 20 seconds. I feel like it ought to be done by now, don't you think? So I'll go ahead and let that go. And then you'll notice the light flipped off. And the system is like a BIOS update almost, or a BIOS reset. This system is basically shutting down and starting up again. And then starting to boot as though it were brand new out of the box. So as it's doing that, what I'm going to do, have I turned this machine on? Let's turn this one on. I should have everything hooked up. Yeah, I have the power switch off in the back. Let's turn that on. Then I've got a keyboard and a mouse, and we're going to switch over to this machine here that's on this network. This machine here is on the home network. This machine here is on this network, okay? That's why I'm doing it this way, so I can separate the two things and show you without interrupting my own broadcast. Not a system you would find in actual use unless somebody was a content creator trying to demonstrate something to their audience about networking without taking their own network down in the process. You with me? So, oh, I see a few more folks have joined us here. Frankie B says hello. Hey, Frankie, good to see you, my friend. Trend Leader says hello from Florida. And Richard is joining us as well. All right. Getting a full house today. I love it. Let me jump over to this machine. We should be booted already. Let me jump to my HDMI 3 input right here. Oh, no video. What the heck? What the heck? Why am I not getting video? Let me just double check my HDMI cable is plugged all the way in. You know me and cables. Sometimes I'm a little too gentle with them. And let me put camera. Oh, there it is. That's probably what the issue was. All right. So first thing I want to do is be able to log into the router, and I have to know the IP address of the router. I'm going to do that by just coming down here and typing CMD for the command prompt. Press enter. Type IP for Internet Protocol, config, short for configuration, /all, and that'll give me all of the addresses and assignments to all of the networking adapters, of which this computer has many. Your computer may only have one. And right there is the connection we're using. You can see how we have so much more information on this adapter. And it says we're at 192, where is it? 192.168.50.1 is our default gateway. Your default gateway should be your router. So we'll open a browser, type in 192.168.50.1 and press enter. And it should act like we just took it out of the box for the first time if our reset worked. So do we want to create a new network? That's exactly what we're going to want to do. So you just follow the block, the big blue box. And it says, all right, well, put the two routers in the same room and blah, blah, blah. Let me go back here for a second because I don't want to set this up in mesh mode. Let's try the advanced settings. Oh, that was my Samsung Magician giving me grief. Let's see, choose the operation mode right here. So if we want to be just a wireless router, this is, you could be a repeater, you could be an access point, you could be a media bridge, or the AI mesh. All right, so we just want to be a wireless router. And then, you know, we choose the connection types. Again, it's asking about the WAN connection here. I think it does this automatically, but let's see what the options are. The WAN connection type will be the WAN port. This is the LAN ports. So you can move the WAN port around. I don't know why you'd want to, but we're gonna just say we stick with that, leave everything at defaults. We'll do a DHCP, automatic IP. That's the one we want right there, automatic. The DHCP, let me uncheck this option here. We should be able to just choose automatic IP, and it wants us to give names to the SSID. So we don't necessarily need to enable Wi-Fi on this. I mean, it would sort of be a waste of money if we didn't. So for the sake of an example, we'll just type in example Wi-Fi name. And wireless security will just be guest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can combine these channels to give whatever wireless device the best signal. But if you're dealing with older wireless devices, then you could run into compatibility problems where it's just not connecting to your Wi-Fi. And that's because some of your Wi-Fi equipment's too old to be smart. This would be considered a smart way to switch channels to whatever is the best, fastest channel. And the default is that you want the best. But you can't have the best while also having Klingons that are, you know, old school, slowing you down because you don't want to replace them for $10. You know, pick a lane is all I'm saying. If you want fast, then you need to replace everything with things that are going to be that speed. If you want to keep something old and backwards compatible, then you cannot advance forward to the smart modes like this. It likely will not work. Let's go ahead and hit apply. Now we need to have a router login name and password. So I'm just going to put in admin, and the password will be this is my password. And then I have to type it again. This is my password. And we'll hit next. And that says the latest firmware is available. So I don't even have to check the firmware. During the setup, ASUS and many others do this. Netgear will do this. TP-Link will do this. When you're running the initial setup, it wants to make sure you're grabbing the latest firmware for the best performance and security, which is really handy. But if we already had this set up and we didn't want to reset it, we'd have to go into the menuing system. And there's a way to check it in the menuing system on every router. Now, if your router is being provided by your internet service provider, this is not your responsibility and you should stay out of it. Your internet service provider will distribute the firmware updates after they test them to make sure it doesn't have any compatibility problems with their network. So if you did this and it caused your internet to go out, that would be billable to you. In theory, they would be able to say you damaged it because you put a firmware update on there that we did not approve. But if you buy your own router, then it's really up to you to stay on top of this. And even if you have, you know, the option many routers have to automatically update the firmware when one becomes available, how do you know that that's working if you don't check it? So from time to time, you still want to log in and audit and verify that everything is working as it should, because ignorance is bliss. If you don't bother looking, then you don't really know if it's happening or not. And it doesn't mean you have to do that constantly, but I'd say once or twice a year, log into that router and verify that if you do have automatic updates, that it is actually automatically updating. All right, so it says don't power off the Zen ET12 and upgrade. Okay, now it's done. So we hit next. And let's see, you've changed SSID as a result. And where is that? Yeah, that's fine. Once the new SSD is connected, I don't want to connect to it. Internet connection setting is finished. You've changed the SSID. Oh, this is the summary. Yeah, that's what we've accomplished. What's interesting is there's no OK or finish button here. But they are telling you, just go to www.ASUS Router to continue any further configuration. What we've done out of the box is we've got it set up and running. That's it. If you want to take it further than that, we just go to asus.router.com. We sign in with the name and password we just set up. And we log in. Now, let's see when this keeps coming up. Dear users, thank you for your ongoing support. In order to comply with privacy, your data we brought updated. Who cares? Okay. Then there's an end user license agreement. Say you're over 16 years old. Oh, it's going to make me scroll. Please scroll to the bottom. It says right here. So we'll scroll to the bottom, and then that button lit up saying, okay, you can click me now. And there's the privacy notice. Again, you got to scroll to the bottom. That agree button lights up. I mean, it's not like you can disagree with it. If you disagree with it, unplug it, put it back in the box, and return it. There's no negotiation there, so I don't know why you have to read it or scroll to the bottom. That's a boilerplate disclaimer for legal purposes and has nothing to do with people's behavior or understanding of what they're agreeing to. And if we go down here to administration, this is usually where firmware updates are. And you'll notice underneath all of these menus on the left, it opens up menus on the top, all of these tabs. And this tab says firmware upgrade. So auto firmware upgrade is enabled by default, and then we can tell it to check, in the middle of the night or early in the morning when somebody is less likely going to be using the router, so that it can update without kicking anybody off. Now, if you're running this where it's 24/7 and people need to access it every minute of every day, then you might want to turn that feature off and do it yourself in a controlled environment where you know it's safe to turn it off. But for most people, you just leave it on auto firmware upgrade, security updates. And if you want to just double check it, just go ahead and hit the check button and it'll check to see if there's a newer version than what it grabbed for us automatically. You'd be surprised. And if you want experimental firmware, you can check that box. And you can get beta versions. And if you're curious, if you want to check it by hand and go to the ASUS website for this product and see what the latest firmware download is and compare it to the version you have, that information is right here at the bottom of the screen. And then you would download the firmware and then hit the upload button, just like you would on a BIOS on a motherboard. And with that, you've got all the options in here from Amazon Alexa tie-ins. And again, higher end routers include that. If you want to set up the mesh later, you can go through this system here. And it's important with the AI mesh that the firmware revisions on all the routers are the latest. If we're using the same routers, then they all should have the same firmware. It's just going to make life easier. It may not absolutely be required with regards to the unit working, but if you want it to work at its pinnacle, penultimate best, then you're definitely going to want to make sure that all the routers are as identical as possible. And at the very least, they all have the latest firmware if they're different models. But, like I said, some routers allow you to connect to other models for mesh. And if so, just be sure that you manually check them for the latest firmware first and set up the AI mesh second. Now, if you've already set up the AI mesh and everything's working, and you're like, well, now how do I check? Because let's say, for example, in mesh mode, depending on if you're mixing and matching different models, I can tell you if they're all the same model, the master unit should go ahead and update the firmware automatically on the satellite units. But what if the satellite units are different models? That varies depending on the manufacturer. You still may need to log into them individually and check them from time to time. But it's more important during the setup that you have the latest firmware. As you continue to use it, obviously for security settings, it's always a good idea to check from time to time. But nothing's worse than setting up a new system, especially something like mesh if you've never done it before, and having to make that harder than it needs to be when all you had to do was update the firmware for everything to go a lot smoother. So I would emphasize this primarily during the initial setup, because there's likely not going to be a firmware update very soon. I don't know when this last firmware update for this unit came out, but I will say that the older the unit gets, the less frequent the updates are. And if it's a brand new, just released router, you'll probably get a bunch of them. You know, could be a half dozen in the first year alone. So the importance of that, or the critical nature of that, is really dependent on the situation of the age of the router and how long you've had it. All right, so we're done with this one. That's all I wanted to do. We've reset it. We've reset the login name and password, and we're just going to repeat this. So all I have to do is hit the off switch, and you'll see when I hit the off switch, the light will go off, and the unit is off. It's a physical up and down switch, which is really unusual for a router to have that. And I'm just going to work my way across the desk here. So we're going to grab all the same cables from over here in the back of this router, and we're going to move them to the back of this router in the same positions. So the Ethernet cable here will go here, and this Ethernet cable here will go here. And then the power cable, it's the same router, it's the same power adapter. Since I'm only using them one at a time, I don't need to get 3 power adapters. But if I was going to use them at the same time, then each one obviously would need its own power adapter simultaneously. Let's go ahead and turn this one on. Whoops, it slipped on me. We'll let that do whatever that's doing. It's booting, and I'm going to grab my router reset tool right here. And while that's booting up, let me take a look in the chat room and see if there's any questions for me. At any point, if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat and hopefully I'll see it. David Graham said, does it have auto between 2.4 and 5? Like my printer requires 2.4, but I need 5. So essentially the way that that would work is when it's in smart mode, if you have a printer that's only 2.4 and it's an older printer, then it may not connect. So then what you would do is you would create a separate Wi-Fi for 2.4, a separate Wi-Fi for 5 gigahertz. This is also 6 gigahertz as well. And so you could have my Wi-Fi name 2.24, that would be 2.4. My Wi-Fi name, whatever you name it, 5. Give it a name that you'll recognize. My Wi-Fi name 6. And you separate them out into 3 Wi-Fi bands. And then your printer will work fine, and then when you connect your phone will say, which one of these do you want to connect to? So if your phone has 2.4, 5, or 6, you have to tell the phone which one you want. So you pick the SSID, you enter the password. You could have a different password on each one. If you have a very new phone, and that phone can automatically switch to whatever the latest bandwidth is, and your router can automatically switch, then you can enable the default settings, which is to just let the router automatically choose the right band. But then your printer will probably not work anymore because the printer is so old, it's not smart. It doesn't have that ability. So then you'll have to do it by hand, and you'll do that for every bit of old networking equipment you're trying to connect. And whenever you get rid of it, you'll finally be able to turn the feature on the router. But that's on you. So it will do either, depending on how you configure it. But out of the box, it wants to default into the smart high performance mode because that's what you paid for. All right, I got my pen. And again, I'm going to push this little reset button in right here. And I guess, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. You see it starts flashing? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ought to be enough. Yep, the light went out. That's what I'm looking for. Usually on a regular router, you will see some effect of the lights flashing together, something indicating a reset has taken place. And then the router has to restart, it reboots. And depending on the advancements of the router, that reboot could take 30 seconds on a cheap router, or it could take 2 or 3 minutes, which would be a very long time, but on a high-end, more corporate level, more powerful router. Okay, so just so you know, that's normal and expected. With that rebooting, there's no telling if we're going to get the same IP address again. Just because this one got that 192.168.50, I don't know that this one will. I would not assume. So when this reboots, well, maybe it's already rebooting. I don't know what the pulsing green light means. Well, let's jump back over here. And we still have the screen up. I should have closed this because that's a little confusing, isn't it? When I turn the unit off, I should have just closed this. Let's go back to command. And again, ipconfig /all. And you'll see here, our IP address is our gateway, which is interestingly the same, 192.168.50.1 according to this. Let's try it and see if it works. 192.168.50.1. And again, we're right back to the same setup as an individual router, and we will repeat the exact same steps. So I'm going to go to advanced here. I'm going to choose the operation mode to be wireless router. And connection types are fine. Where our WAN is on automatic here on the source of our internet. And then assign a unique name or SSID. So my Wi-Fi. And then security, we'll just put guest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's going to make the password the same, even though you'll see this one's called 6G, this one's called 5G, this one's a 5G, and 2.4. So by keeping all the names identical like this with the same password, it's possible for the unit to operate in what's called the smart mode, where it picks the fastest signal, or the channel rather, for the device. But if it's an older device, and I cannot emphasize this enough, you will likely have issues connecting to your router. And that older device will hold back the rest of your entire network. That's the cost of refusing to give up old technology. Accept it or replace it. With that, we'll hit apply. And the router login name. I'm going to try and keep myself consistent here. Admin, and this is my password. At least next time, I might be able to log in. This is my password. And then I'll hit next. Was it checking for firmware? Is that what it does? Yeah. So I don't know what version of firmware we have now. We don't have to upgrade this right now. We can cancel this, but I think it would be a fool's adventure to cancel this. It's trying to protect you. And it's saying that whatever version we have now is old. It's not saying how old. It's not saying it's ancient. It's not saying it's only one step behind. Because either way, it's old. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. There's that curiosity, though. What version did we have right now? So just to answer that curiosity, I'm going to go against my advice. We're going to hit cancel. And then we have our summary page. And again, it's going to tell us to go to the web address up here, the ASUSrouter.com, and log in with the credentials we just created. Now, this would be an example where you've already got your router set up. It's been set up for a while now, and you've never checked it, or you can't remember the last time you've checked it. So on this router, and most routers, you go to something like administration or settings or advanced. There's administration. We'll go to the firmware tab, and it should tell us what our version is right down here. We're at 3004.388. That's primarily what I'm looking at, and this 24542 build number. And you'll see auto firmware upgrade is off. You see how the defaults changed because I hit cancel. So if I hit check, it should come up with the same offer of the newer firmware in just a moment here. So it checks out ASUS's support server. It says, here's the version I have. How does that compare to the latest version? and it says the latest version is 3.0.0.6.102. If you were expecting a big dialog pop up to say, you know, to have graffiti on your screen, or not graffiti, confetti, and say, congratulations, it's very subtle. It doesn't make a big deal out of it. So you've got to pay attention to what's on the screen. So it's saying the latest version is here, right? So let's hit firmware upgrade. And it automatically goes and downloads that latest version, and then we'll apply it. Then if we want to, we can turn the firmware auto update on, turn that feature on, and select what time. I usually pick the wee hours of the morning. And unlike the BIOS setup, or not the BIOS setup, but the router setup where it just says it's updating, that's a different update screen than after you've set it up and you check it in the future. Because here we're getting a progress bar, which we weren't getting before. And so the way it displays it is different from the initial setup. And most people don't remember the initial setup because they would have done that, you know, potentially years ago. But even if it was last week, they don't remember. But if by demonstrating this live on camera, I can show you how it looks, varies if you're doing it during setup or after setup. And you will be going into this to update it after setup many, many times versus just doing the original out-of-box setup, which you should only do once unless you have to do a complete reset for some reason, which is far less common. So it downloads the firmware and it starts programming or updating the firmware, which is no different than updating the BIOS on a motherboard. You need to leave it alone. Don't touch it. You can do other things with the computer, don't get me wrong. You can open a browser, you can watch YouTube videos, but this only takes about 3 minutes. It shouldn't take very long. And then once it applies, just like a motherboard, it needs to reboot. When it reboots, we'll sign back into it. We'll turn that firmware auto update feature on. And again, there's dozens and dozens of menus and submenus in this bad boy that's highly configurable. Most people are just going to go through the out-of-box wizard and be done with it, and it's going to run perfectly. But for people who prefer more control or have higher needs, higher demands, this router does all of that. Lugrini says, I'm hoping ASUS chooses to continue support for the Zen BT10. Do you know when the support ends? You know, they don't update these routers forever. You got to pay an employee or several employees not only to design and update the firmware, but then all the hours and hours and days and weeks to test it before they release it to the public. And these people obviously are paid, you know, for their time. All of their employees aren't there as volunteers. It's not a charity. And at some point, when the cost of supporting the router exceeds the amount of profit they've made, unless it's under warranty, they need to cut that. And they got to cut it loose and put their developers and programmers on newer introduced products. Put their time and attention more towards the new stuff. So once they abandon it, that's a good signal for you that you should plan on replacing that router within a year. Most people don't. But that's why, you know, part of the reason why the scamming industry, viruses and things like that, that's why they're $1 billion industry on the planet. Because people tend to react after it happens. But if you're proactive, you can prevent it from happening, except you'll never know you prevented it. It just won't happen. And then you might pat yourself on the back saying, look at how good of a computer user I am. I didn't infect myself. When it had nothing to do with your clicking. It had to do with making sure your router was up to date or your antivirus is up to date. Stuff like that, just basic maintenance. And if you don't do that and you have a problem, it could be because you didn't think it was that important until it was too late. Just like car insurance. Who needs that? Well, pretty much anybody who gets into a car accident. When's that going to happen? I'll make sure I do that on a long road trip. No, most car accidents happen within 5 miles of your home. Okay, then I'll move. It's insurance. That's all it is. And if you don't want insurance, good luck. I hope you're a very lucky person. But this is free. It only takes a few minutes, and I can't imagine the level of laziness and denial and delusion that would be required to somehow justify that sort of ignorance. But, you know, it's the public. Now, I know that's not affecting any of you guys, obviously. You're more interested, you're more technical savvy than the average user. But if there are average users watching this, and I'm sure you know some, you know, help spread the good word is all I'm saying. Okay, we're going to log back in now that it's rebooted. This is my password. Okay, very good. And then what we're going to do here, just to keep all of these the same, is, let's see, dear users, oh, we go through this again. Right. Boilerplate disclaimers that are completely meaningless to anybody but a lawyer or a corporation. Now, let's go back to administration and back over to firmware upgrade. Now, auto firmware upgrade is on. Oh, that's interesting. And then I'll set it to do this at 4 o'clock in the morning. Like so. And is there a save, or how do I? There's no saving. It just automatically saves it. I guess there's no apply or OK. You got a little bit of summary at the top of the screen here. The operational mode is a router. It's not a mesh. It's not an access point. It's not a bridge. It tells you our latest, or installed rather, firmware revision, and then our SSID names in case you forgot them. And we can always just check for updates again. The router is checking. And again, ASUS is pretty subtle about this stuff. So we're going to watch down here for the results, or right here. It's not necessarily consistent, as I recall, about where it places the response. Okay, so the response is, it adds the latest version here, and then it says, we have 36597, and the latest version says it's 36698. Even this number, this 465 and 469. Isn't that interesting? We just upgraded the firmware, but we did not get the latest one. In some cases, and this is true of motherboards, especially AMD motherboards, you may need to upgrade to the latest firmware revision of before there was a design change. And that design change requires the previous design be the latest version that it builds on top of. This is highly unusual. And I don't believe it did this when we did the automatic update. So when we do the third one, we'll check this again. Now, eventually, because we've got auto firmware upgrade on, it will check it and do it. We don't have to do it right now. But I mean, if I'm setting this up, I want to set it up to be ready. You know, I don't want to halfway set it up. So hit the firmware upgrade button. And once again, it'll go through this process one more time. And we'll repeat this as many times as we have to. It shouldn't take any more than 2, though. Like, this is pretty unusual, and I'm kind of glad, well, not kind of, I am glad that it happened live on camera, because that's so unusual to catch something like that. But it is possible. And I will say, the more expensive your router is, the more high-end and bells, whistles, and features, the more likely that is. Basic routers generally get basic firmware updates. They don't get these advances like this, these kind of advanced firmwares. With regards to the Zen BT10, let me see, while we're waiting on this, we'll go to Gemini and ask, when does support end for ASUS BT10 Wi-Fi mesh router? Whew, my typing is really bad today. ASUS BT10. Okay. So Gemini says, ASUS guarantees official security update support for the ASUS ZenWiFi BT10. That's the model that Luke Greeny in our chat room has, to the end of 2027. So starting January 1st of 2028, there will no longer be any updates. So you got a year and a half And the warranty on it is 3 years. So you'll be past your warranty. And after that, it'll become what we call EOL, or end of life. And what that means is it'll continue to run. It just won't get any better. It won't get any more secure. You won't get any more updates. And so within a year of the end of support, let's just, for the sake of keeping things simple, say it's January 1st of 2028. It would be my advice to you that you should replace that router with a newer model that's supported at some point in 2028. Before 2029 is all I'm saying. Just do it before 2029. Otherwise, if it's also possible that ASUS says, we've decided to go ahead and extend the updates, which they might do, depending on the popularity of the router and the industry. So it's not unusual for a company to extend support. It's also not unusual for a company to remain true to those end of support dates. And again, the router will continue to function. It's just the risk of attackers getting into your router that remains unpatched any further beyond that point. The risk of that increases every day. Every day. Ad infinitum, forever. It'll always get weaker and more vulnerable every day you use it until somebody breaks into it, and then you'll know. So ideally, you will replace it before that happens. And the good news is, with routers, you know, when you get that last update, whenever that last update comes out, you probably got a year maximum. So you have a year to think about, what do I want to replace this with? Or am I willing to take the risk and accept responsibility for my identity being stolen or my bank accounts being emptied, and accept, make your choice and lie in your bed that you made. That's all I'm saying. You make a knowledgeable, informed decision and accept accountability for your choices. That's all I'm saying, because if you choose to take that risk and you lose, I hope you learn a lesson from it. You may not. On the other hand, if you don't want to go through that hassle because it'll cost you 5 times or 10 times more than a new router will, not to mention the investment of your time and the headache and stress, you'll take care of it before that happens. Because trust me, it'll be a lot cheaper and a lot less stressful for you to shop around, look for a good price, set aside a time when you want to do it, than waking up one morning and canceling all your plans because you just got hacked and your bank accounts just got emptied and your identity's been stolen, or all your files have been encrypted with ransomware. I've seen it all. It always happens to people who think it's not going to happen to them. Everybody who's ever been infected always thought it wasn't going to happen. Like they were somehow immune and better than everybody else on the planet. I don't want to be that guy, but you're just like everybody else, okay? You're just as vulnerable. And no matter what you tell yourself, it doesn't change reality. But it's your business, it's your decision, and it's your consequences. And I want to be very clear on that. So when and if something bad happens, you know exactly whose fault it is. Now, I'm going to sign back in here. So let's see, admin, and this is my password. Okay, what do we got now? Another notice. That full screen so I can read it. Oh, it's their privacy notice. That's fine. Oh, that one I didn't have to scroll down for. We're going to go back to administration, and we're going to go back over to firmware upgrade. And now I'm kind of curious on the other one. Did we get the same version? So now 698, if you just look at the last 3 numbers, let's hit check. And I guess the results of the check are going to be a 3rd line that appear down here when it's done. And you'll notice it doesn't tell us. It doesn't say, oh yeah, it does tell us. The router's current firmware is the latest version. So I was curious if it was going to give us another version, and we had to compare them ourselves. And you'll also notice the update firmware box here isn't here anymore. So if you see that box, then clearly the number here and the number here will be different. That is the way ASUS is. They think everybody's a nerd. They don't think regular people buy their products. When I talk to ASUS, they're very snobby and elitist, in my opinion, when it comes to sort of making the interface a little more end-user friendly. And they've been very clear with me that their consumers don't want that. And I said, well, where do you get that information? And they said, our forums. And I'm like, well, regular consumers don't go on forums. And their attitude was, that's not true. Our consumers are in our forums and we listen to what they want. So they are appealing and pandering to a technical crowd, not to the average person. And they do this with their motherboards, they do it with their documentation. And if I had one big complaint about ASUS, it's like it's by engineers and it's for engineers. And regular customers, too bad. There's a bit more technical nature to setting up and configuring ASUS products than their competitors. And they boast it. They say that's right, because we're listening to our community. And the fact that their community is only made up of people of the technical enthusiasm to join forums to talk about it, that does not represent the average consumer. They don't care. They've made it very clear to me that as far as they're concerned, those are the only customers that matter to them. I think it's weird because they're not the majority of people buying their products, but that's who they want to pander to. And it's a very unusual choice. And again, they boast about it. They say, you know, aren't we great? Look at what we do for our customers. And it's like, those aren't your customers. That is some of your customers, but the majority of your customers want plain English and they want simple steps. And they'll say, well, they just go through our wizard and you don't have to be an engineer to do that. But even I kind of got hung up on setting this up. The TP-Link is much, much easier to set up than this ASUS router. And again, it probably doesn't really affect most of you because you all are more technically savvy than the average consumer. All right, so since I've just double checked everything here and clearly it saved my settings without me having to click save, I'm going to go ahead and close this window out. And we'll close this window out. And what I'm going to do now, come back over here to camera 1, I want to turn this unit off and I want to plug this one back in. Just now I'm not sure, did I check it? In other words, when we did this by hand instead of through the automatic process, it didn't give us the latest firmware. We had to then download another firmware after that. But when we set it up out of the box, not only was the screen different, I think even the firmware version was different. But now I'm not sure. I'm doubting myself. So I'm going to go backwards because we still have to do this one. But this should be a pretty easy and quick thing to check. We'll just move these cables over and the power cable over, and we'll fire it up, give it a minute to boot, and we'll log into it and just check it, right? And then I'll know. With auditing things, you can be certain. Many other techs might say, oh, I'm sure it did the latest one. Are you though? Are you that lazy? Because this is a couple minutes of your time, then you would absolutely know for sure. Your choice. Again, when I'm working as a tech, I don't want support calls. Obviously, support calls are going to cost me money for the most part because I'm primarily a managed service provider with a flat fee. So the more often I have to go to a company, the less money I make. The more often the company has to call me, the less confidence they have in my skill. Like, it's negative all the way down. There's no good side to support. So if I can avoid a support call and the customer never experiences the problem, eventually the customer says, what do we pay you for? And they don't understand everything that's happening that I'm preventing. And even I don't know what I've prevented because it never happened. And, you know, I had a customer challenge me on that and said, well, what would happen if we stopped using your services? How long could we go without there being a problem? I don't know. What would happen if you stopped changing the oil in your car? How long can you continue to drive? Years? I have no idea. And so they let me go. And then what happened? Things started to break. Almost within the first year, they started having problems. And they let that person go or that person quit. And it got worse because there were no policies or procedures. Every tech they hired, they just assume we all do the same thing. Every tech did something different. So they kept having them buy more equipment that the tech was familiar with because the previous tech wasn't familiar with, whatever was there. So they replaced it to what they know. Then the replacement tech replaces it with what they know. This went on tech after tech, year after year for 5 years. Now their phone lines were down, their email was down, and they had 2 NASs instead of 1, and neither one of them were operational, both covered in cobwebs. When they called me back and said, do you think you would ever consider coming back to us, accepting us as a customer again? So if I could go back in time to when that customer said, how long could we go? Even that, they were living with problems, and then before those problems were resolved, they stacked up more problems, but they still kept ignoring them. And then that stacked on problems, and then that stacked on problems. So what I was doing, I was preventing one problem, and if there was a problem, I was instantly and immediately nipping that in the bud. So to answer that customer's question, now that we've experienced it, I'd say you'll have a problem within the first year, but you'll ignore it. You will go through technicians, each one doing their own thing that the other one, would never have done. And you're going to spend a lot more money than what you're paying me, and your business is going to go down multiple times. And more than likely, at some point, things will get so bad that you will either have to shut your business down, or you're going to have to call somebody like me back here to put it back. But at that point, it's going to be a big, big job. It's not going to be anything fast. It's going to be days of work, instead of me just maintaining it. But I couldn't have predicted that. I mean, for all I know, they could have hired somebody equal to or better than me that agreed with everything I did and did everything the way I would do it. They didn't, and the odds were they weren't going to, because I know other technicians, and trust me, I wouldn't hire most of them. So that being said, it's the customer's business when the customer doesn't have the business anymore. Long story short. All right, so I think we're booted up here. It looks like it glows purple steady when it's booted. So what I'm going to do, once again, we're going to log in over here. So let's go to this machine again. And I'm assuming we're still going to be that 192.168. Well, I guess I could just go to ASUSrouter.com, right? If I hit Control V, isn't that still? Yeah. And that should take us to the login that we configured. This is my password. And we're going to go to administration. We're going to go to firmware upgrade. And then we're going to go to check right here. And we'll see what the line down here says. I do believe we did this, but I just want to double check myself, because if I'm going to set this back up in 6 months as a mesh and there's different firmware revisions, I might be banging my head against the wall. Okay, so this makes it clear that there is in fact a new version, and that this firmware upgrade button appears. And again, that will only appear if this version is newer than this version here. So we'll go ahead and do that. See, I'm glad I double checked, because I would have been wrong. If I believed what I assumed without checking it, I would be confidently ignorant. Okay. That's not something I want to be on purpose. All right, so while that's working, let me get back over to the chat. If you have any questions for me, please go ahead and ask your questions in the chat room, and I'll do my best to provide answers for you. Mahai says, I have a Brother multi-printer, and after the last update of Windows 11 25H2, the printer is not detected. So what is the model? You say it's a Brother, but what is the model number of the printer? David Graham wants to know if we can connect the router to a provider coaxial cable. What connects to a coaxial cable is a modem. There are no routers that can do that, but there are router modem combination units. all built into one. So if you look at the back of these routers, let me come back over to camera 1. You know what? Let's go to camera 2. If you look at the back of the router, it's completely smooth. There's no coaxial back here. That means it's not a modem and a router. If it does have the coaxial, but it doesn't have all the ports, it only has one port, then that's a modem. It's not a router. This is a router, it's not a modem. And many ISPs offer, if you just get their basic service, they provide you with their own equipment. A lot of times their own equipment is a modem and router combined, where it'll have multiple Ethernet ports on the back. That tells you it's a router. And it'll have the coaxial, that tells you it's a modem as well. One or the other, if it's just coaxial with one jack, that's a modem. Mostly. There may be some exceptions where it's Wi-Fi only, but generally, if it's a router, it'll have more than one jack. If it's a modem, it'll have a coaxial connection. If it's a modem and a router, it'll have both. And again, you can Google the model and the make and model of it, and you can pull up the specs. And the specs will tell you if it's a modem, or if it's a router, or if it's both. Mahai says he's got a brother DCP T525W, and when he put Windows 11 25H2, the printer's not detected. Well, let me quickly Google this for you. Brother DCP. Let's see if I can do this while we're waiting. Brother. I gotta keep going back and forth. I can't remember it. DCP dash, and it was what, a T? Yep, 525W. Not detected. Windows 11 25H2. Let's see what it suggests. Unplug the USB cable from the PC. Here, I can just share the screen with you and you can freeze frame it instead of having to listen to me read it aloud. Let's do that. I think it makes more sense. So you're going to follow step 1 and do what it says here. Then follow step 2. Then go down and follow step 3. And then depending if you're using a USB to connect the printer or if you're using Wi-Fi to connect the printer, follow one step or the other. And let us know if you still have any problems. So basically, you can just hit the space bar or tap your screen if you're watching on a mobile device to freeze frame this so you can read it, and you can always rewind this video and play it back if you want to do it later. So I hope that helps you, and if you still have issues, let us know. Let's get back over to this unit here. It should be done by now, isn't it? It is. So we'll do admin, and this is my password. See, here's the thing. When it set up and it downloaded the firmware update automatically, it also enabled automatic firmware updates. So even though you could argue, hey, I thought it was giving me the latest one, it kind of lied, it needs that one before it can get the latest one for whatever reason. And so it will automatically grab that the next time it checks automatically, which I think is every 24 hours. Let me see if we go back to administration, back over to firmware upgrade. Let's go full screen. There we go. Latest firmware version includes updates from the previous version. That's why we needed that other version. Check the FAQ for more instructions. You can go to ASUS's support site if you want to do this all by hand. Regarding data collection, refer to their privacy notice, blah, 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 because everybody's really important. Everybody thinks they're the most important person on the planet now. I love that, by the way. Anyway, auto firmware upgrade is on. automatically install updates overnight. So it looks like it's checking nightly. So it would have automatically grabbed this newer version if the router were left on 24/7 as it should be. My circumstance is a little different, as I've explained. I want to make sure all the routers have the same version. So we're going to check one more time. And much like the other unit, we should now no longer get a firmware upgrade button here. And the text down here should say, we have, confirm we have the latest version now. So once again, I'm expecting that, but I'm still checking it anyway. You understand? Because I don't want to assume. I want evidence. There's my evidence. Now I can sleep at night. Let's close this out, and we'll go back over to camera 1. Now, normally you would only do this once, right? This is a very unique situation where there are 3 routers, as I previously explained. And this is a great learning tool, because by repeating things over and over and over, you'll start to understand it and do it better. So it's through repetition that we get skill. Some of us are very lucky that we're born with certain inclinations, certain skill sets, or just natural born abilities. We all have that, by the way. Not all of us have discovered what it is. And for everyone else, it has to be explained. And I tried to make these videos for everyone else, right? If this isn't your strength, but you would like it to be your strength, then the more you do it, the better you're going to get. Same with playing the piano. Same with almost anything. Driving a car. Anything you do in your life that you do repeatedly, you will become more proficient in. If you do a fixture on plumbing for the first time in your life, you're probably not going to do a very good job. But if you sort of enjoyed it, or you've got a lot of plumbing issues, or you keep having to go back and revisit the plumbing issue because you're not doing it well because you don't know what you're doing, that is how we learn. And eventually, you'll get to a point where you'll tell somebody, don't waste your time doing this, and they'll say, what do you know, old man? And you get disrespected, and all you try to do is help them, and then you go, okay, you little whippersnapper, bang your head against the wall as many times as you need to. I'll have some Band-Aids over here if you need them. Sometimes, the human experience is like, hey, no spoilers, Grandpa. Let me do this. Fair enough. And when you're tired and frustrated, I'll be here to help you. Otherwise, maybe the kid's got a natural knack for plumbing. Either way, I'm good with it. So we're booting this one up. So that's booting up now. And then one more time, we're going to repeat what we've done here. So let me jump back over to this machine, and we'll go to, let's see, open source projector. There we go. So I can see the way you guys see it. And we'll go back to, I'm going to guess, 192.168.50.1. Does that work? Nope. How about ASUSRouter.com? Will that work? Nope. So that's why I usually do this routine here, where I type CMD, press enter, IP config/all, and see what the IP address is here on the gateway. Oh, that's interesting. Did I plug it in incorrectly? Am I in bridge mode? It shouldn't be on this address. That's my local IP. Now I'm confused. I thought my local IP was... This should be my TP link. Let's pull it up and see if it brings up a TP link or an ASUS router. I'll end this confusion real quick. 192.168.68.1. Now, if this brings up a TP link page, which I think it's going to. Oh, I know what the problem is. All right, class. All right, class. What did I do wrong? I skipped a step. Who wants to tell me the step I skipped. I jumped ahead. There was something I was supposed to do, and I did not do it. Let's see who's paying attention. Dazzle says we're dropping frames. We are not dropping any frames. OBS says there are 0 drop frames. So unfortunately, that's going to be YouTube. That's not us. Just FYI, there's nothing we can do about that on our side. But I appreciate you letting me know. Because sometimes we are dropping frames, but in this case, we are not. So that's happening somewhere else. Gary Tatum says you didn't reset the router. Bing, bing, gold star for Gary Tatum. So let me go get my reset tool. Let's hold the reset button in until the light changes here. So I'll hold reset in. And it's flashing yellow, which I guess means it's resetting. So I'll take the pen out, see if the light goes off. It's not going off. So I don't think I'm holding it in. I wish it had a beep. So I don't think I'm holding it in long enough. Let's hold it. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to reset it again because I'm not confident. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There it goes. It light went out. Now we should be good. Usually between 10 and 25 seconds. If you want to be absolutely certain, hold it in for 30 seconds regardless. You're not going to hurt anything. So we're going to go ahead and let that reset itself. And we'll try again once it's done flashing. That will tell us that it's booted. Yeah. We have an email? All right. Well, thank you. Let's see what we have in email. Oh, Mortant sent an Amazon gift card. A generous one at that. Thank you. That's Thomas. Hello, Carey and Mara and chat. Here's a contribution for the channel from Thomas. Right on. You know, as I've said before to anybody new watching, we aren't funded by corporate sponsors like everybody else. We're here providing the content you're witnessing based on contributions and memberships from our viewers. We're totally 100%, well, not quite 100%. We do get paid to talk about the Windows and Office license keys, but that's not cutting it. Like the bread and butter of the income that we need to operate this channel comes from our viewers. The amount of videos we can make and the items we put on this table are pretty much a direct result of us spending that money, whether it's an Amazon gift card, PayPal contribution, for the things we want to review. So we're not obligated to any manufacturer's rules or policies. We don't have to even tell the manufacturer we're doing it. You buy something on Amazon, just like you would, we put it on the bench and we tell you what we think of it. And we might tag the manufacturer in the hopes that they like it. Maybe they'll want to work with us and send us product for review under no terms or conditions. No NDAs, no speeches, no disclaimers. We are free to speak our minds without any restriction. No subject is off the table. Some manufacturers will say you can't mention this or you don't get paid. You've got to do the video on this day at this time and show it to us before you show it to your audience so we approve it, or you don't get paid. See, I don't have any of those restrictions because I have this amazing audience. And so long as you guys support us, we're going to keep going indefinitely. All right, just so you know, we're not tied to the ebbs and flows of YouTube popularity. We're immune from all of that. Thank goodness. This has been pretty bad out there. Now, just looking at this router, I think that means it's ready to set up. So let's get back over here. And thank you very much, Thomas. Very generous support. And let me get back over. We're going to log into this from this machine. So let me get my story straight. Now, since I left the window open, I'm going to just run the command one more time. Just hit the up arrow, I think, or down arrow. Is that going to work for me? There it is. Push enter. Scroll up. And what's our IP address? Ooh, that's not good. That's a 169.254. That means there is no IP address. If it starts with 169, it's invalid. And if you look in the bottom right corner, you'll see the little globe down here that says we're not connected. So that means we need to refresh. So we will do an IP config /renew. And this has multiple network adapters. It's a high-end small form factor computer. So where it says no operation can be performed, it's because we don't have a cable plugged into those other ports. Most of you watching are only going to have one port anyway. But that's exactly what I expected to say. And it seems to be stuck renewing the one that's in use right now for some reason. And we can release it manually if we have to, which it's looking more and more like we're going to have to. It's not letting go of the previous one. It's sort of locked into it for some reason. And that does happen from time to time. I don't know why this happens. Sometimes you can just type renew and it renews. And other times you type renew and it seems to be stuck. It will eventually time out. And if you want to do this through the graphical user interface, you could go to the icon and say diagnose network problems and just go through the Windows interface to automate this process. So if we restart the adapter, you see that released it in the background. And when the adapter restarts, it'll then request another IP address when it starts back up. So that's another way to accomplish the same thing as what I'm doing in the text. Because I'm old school and I like a little bit more control, I prefer to go into the command window, but you can also just as equally do it this way. And you'll notice it is working. You'll see it's looking for an IP address right now. So it's talking to the router, they're negotiating, and hopefully that'll go solid. Now, if it doesn't go solid, that's okay too, because worst case scenario, you could sit here and fuss with it for the next few minutes and force it, or you could just simply restart the computer. So we're going to go ahead and restart this, and that should be a good enough reset that allows us to get an IP address from this bad boy and be able to log into it here. And these computers, they're so fast these days. The restart takes what, 30 seconds or something? I mean, you can time it. We're live. And if we want to continue fighting with it, it could take 30 minutes. It sort of depends on where your ego and pride are. I just want to get it done. So we're just going to go ahead and restart. You'll see the Elgato video capture device is not sending a signal right now. And now you'll see the Minisforum computer is booting as if it were connected to your monitor directly. I know that freaks some people out sometimes, but hey, what can I tell you, man? I'm a nerd and I like that. I like to use all of your monitors. This one guy has like 500 monitors connected to his computer. That's not possible. Yeah, it is. He does it through YouTube. And a video capture device. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch this down here and see if it gets an IP address this time. Because if it doesn't, that means that maybe I didn't reset the router properly, or I didn't give the router enough time to boot. But I think the router's booted. Everything looks happy. And let's just see what happens. I mean, it shouldn't be taking this long. That's not a good sign. And I'm wondering if maybe I didn't hold the reset down long enough. Yeah, so you'll see we still are not getting a connection. Okay, so again, if I would have just stayed at the command prompt and not rebooted, I'd still be in the same place, and this wasn't faster to do it this way. But one way or another, I'm trying to conclude where is the problem originating. And I'm satisfied it's originating here. I'm looking at my cables. The cables are, I'm like, did I plug them in backwards? No, everything's plugged in exactly the way it should be. So I'm going to grab the pen, and this time when I'm going to hold the reset button down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Now that's probably 3 times longer than I needed, but it won't hurt anything. And I never saw the light go out. Something is different on this unit. It's not behaving the same as the others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to turn it back on again. All right, and that's going to force that machine to restart, and hopefully the reset took effect. I don't know yet. I'm not real confident because when I reset it, I expect to see this light react, the light on top. So it does take a minute to boot. So we do need to be a little bit patient and wait for that to start up before we go looking for an IP address over here. But while we're waiting, let me switch back over to this machine and just take a look in that bottom right corner and see if we're getting assigned an address automatically. And it does not appear that we are. Whoops, I didn't mean to open that. Close this. We're watching this bottom right corner because a brand new router out of the box should go ahead and assign an IP address to you, unless I don't have the cables plugged in the right place or they're not fully plugged all the way in. So I'm going to unplug one more time and then plug back in both cables and see if that does anything any different. Ah, look, it's doing something now. Sometimes it feels like a cable's in and it's not. And so just pushing on the cable is often not enough. You have to unplug the cable and re-plug it back in, reseat it. That's all I did. So working at the command prompt or restarting the computer was completely wrong for this problem, but that's how I figured it out. Sometimes you get lucky using previous experience and saying, oh, I should check these cables first. And sometimes you check the cables first, and it turns out you needed to reset it at the command prompt. It's Murphy's Law. So let's go ahead and open the browser, and we'll go back over to the router login, right, which will be 192, I think it's going to be 50.1. We'll go to advanced settings because it defaults wants to create a mesh system. So we're going to choose operation mode. This is why I say it's not user friendly. This is more nerdy setup. They have to know what these are so you know which one to pick. Other routers don't do this. Only ASUS makes it this complicated. So we want to be in the router mode, and our connection is coming in. See, it should already know where our connection coming in is. That's the thing. The fact that it's asking me and asking me these questions, most routers from other manufacturers do this auto-magically. Set up a wireless network name. All right, so my Wi-Fi, and then wireless security guest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know how far I went before, but I don't care if those don't match the other units. Like, that doesn't matter. And then I'll hit apply. And now we have to give it a login name. So once again, just to keep everything consistent, I'll do everything the same. So this is my password. And then tab and type it again. This is my password. And if I typed them both the same and hit next, it should be happy without any complaints. Okay, latest version. I just want to drop this down. Stop bothering me. Let's do the firmware upgrade here. And then we'll check for a firmware upgrade when we're done, because you're going to find that we're not getting the latest firmware upgrade this way. We're getting the latest version that we can. And then after this, we can get a newer version that requires this version prior. That's very, very unusual. And that's why I'm so glad to be able to show this to you live. I couldn't make this happen if I wanted to. It's just the circumstance of how long these have been sitting on the shelf and what updates ASUS has come out with. So if I don't catch it live, it's highly unlikely, unless I have other routers sitting on the shelf that match, that I could replicate this on camera. Again, if you have questions for me, we certainly encourage asking any questions you have here in our live chat. I'll do my best to provide direction or an answer. And I'm just kind of keeping an eye on that. And I don't see anything yet. But in the meantime, just put your question in there at any time. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. And this is the summary of everything we've done. And it tells us, you know, go to ASUSRouter.com and log into it. So let's go ahead and do that. ASUSRouter.com. What happened? Why is that not working? Let's go back to 192.168.50.1. Oh, look, it's disconnected me. Look down here. Was it rebooting? Yeah, it rebooted. Okay, I was not paying attention. ASUSRouter.com. When I'm connected, when this thing is booted, it should just take me there. There it goes. Now we'll sign in with those credentials that we just set up. This is my password. Once again, we're going to go to administration. Oh, wait a minute. Notice steer user, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we got to go through all this boilerplate disclaimer nonsense. Check the box that I'm over 16, just slightly. Hit agree. Scroll down. Button lights up. Hit agree. And then under administration, under firmware upgrade tab, we'll check. Once again, it goes online to ASUS's servers. It reports this is the version we have and says, is there a new version? Some clueless people who don't understand how computers work will say, that's spying on me. It's sending my private data to them. Well, of course it is. That's how it works. Maybe you should just go back to a pen and paper and live in a log cabin in the woods and write your manifesto. Anyway, we'll hit the firmware upgrade button right there. And we'll get the update to the update. There we go. So again, while that's updating, I'm going to take a look here in the chat and see if there's any questions I can answer for you guys. Feel free to throw your questions out there. Because after this, we're pretty much done for the day. This is the demonstration I wanted to show you. It's kind of a difficult thing to set up with a mini PC on a separate network with these routers on top of my network while I'm live streaming into a capture card with a second PC. You can understand the complexity of trying to show this to you in the most simple way possible. And I certainly hope you appreciate the work that goes into sort of a, how would I describe this setup? It's not a normal setup that you would find in the real world. And it's sort of, you kind of, I have to like think this through. How am I going to do this without interrupting my own connection or interrupting my own network? And it involves a lot of duplication of equipment, which, you know, adds to the complexity of the setup. But overall, you would only have half of the setup, right? You would only have the half I'm showing you. I have doubled it with the other half that you can't see that enables me to show it to you online. And yeah, sometimes I have to sit like the night before and think about, okay, what am I going to need? How am I going to do this? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to need another computer because it has to be on another network. Oh yeah, I'm going to need another network cable. You know, I need the power adapter that goes to the router. I try and do all this the night before and think it through, but I also don't do any rehearsal so that we do it live and show you exactly what happens, warts and all, because that's the real world. The real world has warts, and it's okay. Deal with it. You know, nothing we've seen here that surprised me has been detrimental. It's all very interesting and fascinating to turn these rocks over and see what's underneath of them. And then that way I know, hey, there's no bugs under this one. How else would I know that if I didn't turn it over? And if there are some bugs, I'll deal with it. And if there aren't any bugs, I know I don't have to deal with it. That's my philosophy. Yeah, Mark Gaines joining us. Paul Vircher says hello. There's Eddie Casanova saying hello. And W.E. Holmes joining us from Northern California, where he says it's a lovely 87 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. That sounds lovely. I wish it was that cool here. We're going to hit 114 degrees on Saturday, according to the weather report. I think I'll just go in the oven and stay cool. most of Saturday. Saturday night, I'm sure will be a lot more tolerable. But boy, oh boy, I hope I don't have to go outside Saturday. I am just losing my tolerance for the heat. Right now, it's not that bad. We've got very high humidity, very unusually high humidity. And so instead of the high heat, we have high humidity, which is kind of, I don't know. I don't know if it's better or worse. But I got a feeling when it's 114, we're also still going to have high humidity. And that's the worst possible time to be in Phoenix is the month of August. So when we start getting into, mid to late July, that's when it starts. And it'll be hot and humid both throughout the month of August. Now, I don't think that's much different from anywhere else in the United States, but in Phoenix, where we're not used to the humidity, it's pretty brutal. And for visitors who are not used to the heat, it's pretty brutal. So if you come out any other time, you'll usually just have the heat, the dry heat, like fire. Fire is a dry heat. We're just about done with that firmware update. You'll see they do take a few minutes. They're very similar in size and time as a motherboard BIOS. And much like Dell will give you their BIOSes through Windows Update, if your router is provided by your internet service provider, they're the ones who do this, not you. This is only for people who buy their own routers. If, for example, we were to use the router that our ISP provides, we would not be able to broadcast to you in 4K, and we would not have a strong signal across the entire building. We have to get our own router because they don't make one available from the ISP to do what we need it to do. Okay, so we're going to log in again. And we're going to go, well, I have to go full screen so I can see it the way you guys are seeing it on your entire screen. And we're going to go back over to administration, and we're going to go back over to firmware upgrade. Make sure that that is turned on. We'll set it for 4 o'clock in the morning. And we're going to check. Once again, it should say down here when it's done checking, there is no update, and there will be no firmware update button that appears as a consequence. And that's exactly right. I mean, even before reading this, the fact that the button did not come back, I already know that's going to say that we're current and up to date. That's all I wanted to do. So now I am confident that these routers are all configured with the same firmware, the same login and everything, and any one of these that I take off the shelf randomly can be used individually like any other Wi-Fi router, or it can become the master and the other two can become the satellites if I want to configure it as a mesh. And I only need to use one other router for a mesh. So I could have one client in a small office that I sell that one to, and one client in a larger office that I sell these to. Or I could sell all three of them together and set them up for a wider spread of Wi-Fi coverage. So the very, very optional, very flexible and configurable to our needs, whatever those needs may be. We replaced it because the newer routers are faster than these, and we need the fastest. We must have the fastest connection that we can. So that's the justification. Also, there's sort of a sickness in, I have to buy this. I have to buy the new router for my channel. It's my job. Okay, Carey. I have to smoke these cigarettes. I'm reviewing cigarettes. How can I review them if I don't smoke them? Just admit you're addicted to smoking. No, it's my job. There's a little addiction going on here with the routers and flash drives and things that I'm interested in. And I can justify it because I've turned that into my living. You can do that too, by the way. Nothing special required. You don't need to get a job with somebody. You can just start your own job and you get to play with this stuff all the time. And instead of paying for it, you get paid for it. Think about it. With that being done, we're going to go ahead and shut this off. And I don't need this on anymore, so I can shut that off. So we'll come over here. You notice when I turned it off, it lost its internet connection, right? That's what you would expect it to do, unless it's connected via Wi-Fi that I don't know about. Let's go ahead and shut this bad boy down. And then I don't need any of these cables plugged in anymore, so I'll just start unplugging some cables, including this power brick. We don't need that anymore either. And then I'm ready to start clearing the bench after the show. These things can go back up on the shelf. This goes back up on a different shelf. Luckily for me, this doesn't have a power adapter. It's got a built-in power supply. So that's why I picked this unit versus one of the mini PCs, because then I'd have to run the same kind of plug that I only have one of, and their plugs are too short. So this wasn't a coincidence or a random pull. This was pulled initially. It uses a C13 power cable, whereas these use the laptop style power cables. And I have one of each already here that's 10 feet long. So that's why I picked that computer. There's a rhyme and a reason to everything. A method to the madness, as they say. And I think this did turn off, didn't it? Well, if I hit the switch on the back, I can guarantee it's off. I just couldn't tell from the reflection there. That's a USB port that's blue, not a power light. I'm mostly telling myself that and talking out loud. Assuming you might have been on the same thought wave as I was there. But yeah, I mean, now with our spare routers, that's all of them updated now. And you can see the way that we update them is a little different, but they have a very common process. Whether it's under administrator or system, advanced, it depends on the manufacturer, and even on the model, it can vary from one model to another from the same manufacturer that changed their process. And so how expensive the router is, how powerful the router is, and how new the router is. And of course, with YouTube being the way it is, and Gemini or any other AI chatbot, if you're ever uncertain, you can always just Google it or AI it. Go to gemini.google.com and say, I have an ASUS ET10 Pro router and I want to reset them. How do I do that? And it'll give you all those steps, and it's pretty accurate. When it comes to computer questions, AI is very, very, not perfect, but very good at answering them. And I would argue that it's 200% better than calling some random person in India or Pakistan. Those people have no education. They're just reading a script. At least the AI is going to be a lot more consistent, because you can call support and talk to two different people and get two different answers. AI won't do that. AI will say, here's your answer. And if you say, hey, that answer didn't work, then it'll offer you other solutions or suggestions. But most of the time, it's pretty damn good when it comes to computer stuff. And we're always here to help you as well if you want to reach out to us here on our live chat, or you can send us an email if you'd like more private conversation. Our email address is right here on the screen. We love hearing from you guys, so if you're not bothering us, drop us a line. If you want to share an experience with us, just because you think it's interesting about computers, we'd love to hear your stories. We don't want to hear you telling somebody else's stories. Don't forward us somebody else's articles. Don't forward us somebody else's videos. You create the email. If you want to share a link, it's a link that is your video, or it's your article that you wrote. We love that. But please don't send us other people's content, okay? And we want to know you. We don't want to know some other person random, though, that you're just saying, hey, did you see this? I'm not interested. I'm really not. If I was interested, I would have seen it. I mean, if you saw how much of the tech news I gobble up every single day, it's a serious addiction problem. So most of the time, I'd say 99 times out of 100, when someone's saying, did you see this? The answer is, yeah, I saw it. And I saw it before you did. Or at least by the time you told me, I had already seen it. So I don't need those extra 99 emails. Do me a favor, don't do that. But if you're writing the article, if you're making the content that you're linking to, I am interested in seeing your creation or hearing it, your experience. I don't want to hearsay or gossip. In fact, I really look forward to reading about your experiences, good or bad. And the fact that you take the time to write it means a lot to me. The fact that you took no time at all to copy and paste something is worthless to me. because you put no effort into it. So I'm not putting any effort into it in return. You get it? It's not being rude, it's being respectful. All right, so let's go back over to the chat room now and see if I've missed any questions. Andy says he resets his ISP router every once in a while. I assume it probably needs a reset to update. I mean, you'd have to ask your internet service provider, but in general, they control all of it. Your internet service provider can reset your modem. Your internet service provider can reboot your modem, and they can do that all from their head, wherever their office is. They have full control to see the status of your modem, to see if you're online, to see what the strength of your signal is, if you're getting a good signal. They often don't look at it unless you're calling with a complaint. They'll check it. And then, of course, when it comes to firmware updates, they will generally do that during their regular maintenance times, which will then trigger a restart of the modem, whether you like it or not. At no point do you have to complete their work. However, there are times when the router can get confused or get a glitch where you do need to reset it. When I say reset it, I mean just not a physical reset, but just turn it off and back on again. A reboot, not a reset. You should never need to reset an ISP modem or router. Never, ever. But rebooting them, yeah. Sometimes you might notice your internet's getting slow. And if you call them, you're going to be on hold for a while, and it's frustrating. So the first thing that I would do is I would unplug any routers or modems, let them stay off for a minute, plug them back in again. Let them take a couple minutes to let them reboot, renegotiate, and see if that fixes your internet speed. A lot of times that's all it needs, and you don't need to call support. And if the problem still exists after that, then call support. So that's what I do anyway. David Graham says, did I figure out what was causing the monitor sleep problem? Well, I did. First of all, thanks for following up on that. I had a customer reach out to me on Monday saying that when they come in the morning, the computer's not waking up. It appears to be frozen. And then when I went to log into it later that evening, the computer connected and then went offline. And then the customer said when they came in the morning, the computer wasn't asleep. It was on the desktop, but nothing was working. The whole system was frozen solid. And they just hit the reset button and booted back up, and it's been fine. So that's when I connected remotely. I said, let me know when you have some time, because this was Monday night when it seized. So Tuesday, yesterday, they called me, and I logged into it remotely. I did the power setting troubleshooter, which said it corrected a couple things. I don't know if it did or not. And I noticed the Intel driver assistant wasn't installed on this machine. I can't remember if I took it off or why. So I put it back on because my first thought is video drivers, especially after a Windows update. So sure enough, when I put the Intel driver assistant on, it said there's a new video driver. I said, go ahead and install that. And then I went ahead and cleaned out temp files, use the Microsoft PC Manager just because I'm there, might as well. And restarted it. And then something else I like to do is I'll change the timeout. I think they had it set for 30 minutes. I changed it to 20 minutes and then hit save. And then I changed it back to 30 minutes and hit save just by resetting. You set it to something else and then set it back. But you can't just set it. You've got to set it and save it and then put it back the way it was and save it again. And that kind of refreshes that setting. So if any of these have made a difference, I can't tell you which one it was. But I can tell you that I waited until after everybody went home from the office. And I waited a half an hour. I actually waited about 40 minutes and I logged into it. It's fine. So I waited an hour again and I checked it and it still let me in. And then I waited until before I went to bed at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I logged into it. So it's been sitting for several hours and it's working perfectly. I did not get any call today from the customer. I did say, if it continues to exhibit this behavior, please let me know. The problem with these kind of issues is that there's no consistency. So we just have to wait and see if the problem comes back. And I'd say if we go to this point next week and that customer hasn't called me in that period of time, it appears we resolved the issue. But it's very unclear to me specifically what the issue is. But I did go after, you know, the normal culprits. And since there was a video driver that was newer, that was available, there's no harm in grabbing that regardless. I just didn't know because I didn't realize that that tool, the Intel Driver Assistant, was no longer installed. And I don't know why. I can't remember if I took it out or maybe somebody there disabled it. I don't know. And I'm not looking to point any blame. I just want the problem fixed. So that's what I know. And so far, so good. VX in the chat room says, Carey, I had to replace my motherboard BIOS battery for the first time recently in 10 years. PC would go into a constant boot loop, turning off and then rebooting by itself. How many batteries have I replaced? Hundreds. You know, I've worked on literally tens of thousands of computers in the last 35 years. And they've always had that battery. They've always had a CR2032 in them. Some of the boards had a rechargeable battery. Some boards, yeah, they were using rechargeable batteries for a while, and those suck. They were soldered right onto the board. But that's been going on since 1991, my friend. How many batteries have you changed since 1991? Generally, they don't last 10 years. You get about 5 years out of them. It looks like it took you an additional 5 years before you saw any, realized any consequences. But that's okay. You know, it's not a big deal. I always check the easy things first. And if, you know, the older the computer is, the more likely those kind of consumable materials like batteries on laptops and desktops with BIOSes, they're going to go out. And if you're going to keep a computer a long time, that's to be expected. That's going to be a part you're going to change every 5 years, regardless if it needs it or not. You should be changing it before it goes out, not after it's gone out and you don't know how long it's been dead. But if you had it for 10 years, it's probably been dead half of that time and you just didn't know. And it just got to a point where eventually it was affecting your computer booting. But you're not exempt from battery life any more than anybody else on this planet. It's not going to last longer for you than it does for anybody else, not by any measurable, consistent number. So as long as you know, if you're going to keep a computer that long, you will have to replace the battery after 5 years, or you should anyway. Then you'll never be surprised like that ever again. So again, what I do is preventive maintenance. And so people go, well, how do I know you prevented a problem? I go, well, did you have a problem? And they go, no. I go, well, why do you suppose that was? I don't know. What if you'd have done nothing? Well, you probably would have had a problem. What problem? I don't know, because we didn't allow the problem to happen because we stayed on top of maintenance before waiting until it became a problem. It's a difficult pitch for some people to get through their heads. Well, why do I have insurance? I don't file any claims. Not yet. It's an insurance policy is all it is. So, yeah, and that's true for a laptop or a UPS. Those batteries need to be changed about every 5 years. Because even though you might say, well, the battery still works. Yeah, that's, you know, maybe it's got this much charge left on it. Oh, the UPS isn't telling me anything's wrong. Well, unplug the UPS from the wall and see how long the computer stays on. If it used to stay on for 10 minutes when it was new, you might get 10 seconds out of it now with what's left on your battery. And you just don't know that because you never tested it. But I can guarantee you, if that battery is 5 years old, it's definitely not going to have much life left in it. Just because the UPS says everything's fine, don't believe it. You'll find out when there's a power outage and you lost your work that you probably should have stayed on top of that before you found yourself in that position, where then in that case you would have prevented it. You would have been able to save your work, which is the whole point of having the UPS. So if you're not going to change the battery, you might as well just unplug the UPS and throw it in the recycle bin. Pick a lane. If you're going to have one, expect to replace the battery every 5 years. Period. No exceptions. If you're not willing to do that, don't buy one. or accept the consequences and know, Carey warned me this was going to happen, and it will. I promise you. Give it time. So you can avoid that by just following my advice, but either way, know what to expect. It's the same for you as everybody else. When I'm saying you have to change a battery every 5 years, everybody, not just you, everybody. So you're not exempt from that unless you choose not to buy the product. And that's where we are with batteries in 2026 on these electronic devices. Now in the future, maybe that'll change to 10 years. Smoke detector batteries used to only last like a year. Now you can get smoke detectors that are battery operated for 10 years. That's how good the batteries are they're using in them. And then of course you need to change a smoke detector out because the sensors, the smoke detector, and like if it's a carbon monoxide detector, they get kind of less accurate the older they get, whether it's because of dirt and grime building up on the sensor. And so they'll tell you the battery's not replaceable. After 10 years, this thing will start to beep, and that means it's time to replace it. I don't know why somebody would want to take one apart and manually change the battery and manually clean the sensors when your life and the life of the people you live with is at risk. And smoke detectors are cheaper now than they've ever been. And you have a battery in them. If they're not electronically powered through the wiring, then they just have a 10-year battery. How many 10-year periods of time do you expect to have to deal with this in your life? Are you going to live to be 300? Probably not. So in a lifetime, you may only have to change a smoke detector that lasts 10 years 5 times, right? If you're an adult, you're already in your 20s or 30s, and you start taking that responsibility on, you'll be in your 80s or 90s by the time you have to change it out for the 6th time. So it's not that big of a deal, nor is it a big expense. And there's way too much at risk, in my opinion, to try and cheap out on it or to ignore the beeping sound. At that point, just take the thing off the wall and throw it away and just be without one. You might be violating city code, but that's between you and the code enforcement. I don't care what you do. If you want to forget to open the flue on the fireplace and not wake up, you did it to yourself. The problem is anybody that lives with you who also is a victim of your decision making. If you won't do it for yourself, at least have the common courtesy to do it for the people you care about. That's my opinion. So we're just at the 2-hour mark here, and that's all I have for today. I'm happy to entertain what's on your mind. If it's tech related, go ahead and put that in the chat now. If I don't see anything in the chat, then we're going to wrap it up for today. If I do see things in the chat, we'll keep going. I don't have to be anywhere. If there's no interaction, then my demonstration is over. So I got done what I wanted to do, and I'm just glad I found something, because I was spending all day yesterday thinking I really want to do a video today. I don't know what to do it on. And then finally it occurred to me I had meant to do this, and I just kept putting it off and forgot. So thankfully I remembered, and that's why we have a video today. We will be back on Friday, and we are expecting a couple new mini PCs coming in. Will I have them by Friday? We'll find out, because that's what Friday's show will be about. Otherwise, if they don't come in, I don't know what Friday's show will be about, but there will be a Friday show. Corey Man says hello from Canada. Yeah, right on. Welcome in, Corey Man. Bikeman wants to know if it's okay to use a USB-A port on the rear of his desktop. That's normally reserved for BIOS flash or for another external drive. Yeah, USB, the U in USB means universal. It's not a dedicated port. If you see that the port is there for BIOS flashing, that means that if you're going to BIOS flash the motherboard using what's that called? Like, you can flash the BIOS from any port, any USB port will work. But if you want to use the that special feature some motherboards have. I forget what it's called. You hold the button in on the back. Then the BIOS has to be named a certain name, and it has to be plugged into a certain port for that to work. So it's just a standard USB port. It's no different than any other USB port. Unless you're doing that kind of a BIOS update. Any other BIOS update, whether you're booting from a flash drive or you are running a utility in Windows or going into the BIOS manually, then it doesn't matter what USB port you use for the BIOS update. It's only that BIOS flashback. That's what it's called. Thank you, Corey Man and Terrell. That's the word I was looking for. Only BIOS flashback works with one USB port. And the file name has to be named to one file name because it's hard-coded into the BIOS to look at that one port for that specific file name. Other than that, you can update a BIOS from any USB port when you do it the way I show you, unless I'm showing you BIOS flashback. So yeah, you can use the USB port for whatever you want.
Your notes, titles, and thumbnail are all updated, including the links to these guys, including. And what I found on Amazon is either the 2-pack or the 1-pack that's been.
Oh, they have these refurbished.
Yes.
So Mara is telling, I don't know how well that's picking you up on the microphone. You've got all the video notes updated. That contains everything we talked about that requires notes, including links to these products. So correct. Even though they don't make these anymore, they're an older model, they have them renewed.
Yes.
And the links are in the video notes for the pricing.
Along with the official link.
And if ASUS's official website for this product, which of course is no longer made or sold, but remains there for support questions and specifications. Thank you, Mara.
You're welcome.
BX says, forgot to say a big hello from England. I had another job, replaced thermal paste on my NVIDIA 2080 Ti as it was throttling. Apart from that, my 9-year-old PC is hanging on. There you go. Yeah, if you do the maintenance on it, the regular maintenance, replacing thermal paste isn't something that typically needs to be done ever. But some people feel it makes a difference, and you can't tell them otherwise if that's. And in some cases, they're right. In most cases, it's a psychological thing. But, you know, staying on top of it doesn't hurt. Replacing it, as long as you're careful and you don't damage it, you know what you're doing, or you get lucky. I very rarely ever change thermal paste to fix a heat issue. I can count on one hand in my entire career where that's made any difference. But on the internet, you'd think that this is a constant battle people have. So I don't know what the people on the internet are doing, but in the real world, in corporate America, you won't be chewing any thermal paste replacements. But in the real world, in corporate America, they won't be having any 9-year-old computers. If they do, it's probably leave your fingers off of it because we can't replace it. You stay away from it, and if you touch it, you can just collect your things and walk out of the building. So the way corporate IT works is very different from what you're seeing on the internet. Just so you know that. Enthusiasts doing unnecessary work because of a placebo effect or an extreme overclocking scenario that would justify it is not what's done in corporate America. There's very few computers that would have a liquid cooler, RGB, or would be overclocked or even have XMP turned on. We don't do that stuff in corporate America. With a few exceptions, it's not done. And doing that kind of enthusiast YouTube, TikTok stuff will get you in trouble in corporate America. You follow the rules that the company tells you to follow, not what some influencer says. Now, what you do at home is your business. But that's why a lot of the stuff that's on from influencers is just misinformation. And it's almost like a religious belief than it is any sort of scientific education. And I'm here for the science. I'm not here for the what would we call that, conspiracy or, I mean, I see some of the stuff people post and some of the worst advice I've ever seen. And I saw a picture and I shared it on my Facebook the other day, and it's a plumber's van in Colorado. And on the side of the van or the back of the van, it says, "We fix what ChatGPT told you to, suggested you do yourself. We fixed that." I love that. That goes back to the $5 haircuts. You know, this barber has a competing barber open next to him. It's one of those big chains, and they're saying, you know, haircuts for $5. This guy's freaking out. I can't sell haircuts for $5. I'll go out of business. And his marketing guy says, don't worry about it. You just put up a sign that says, we fix $5 haircuts. Your business is going to be just fine. So, you know, this idea that this plumbing company put this on their van, we fix what ChatGPT suggested you do to fix it yourself. Brilliant marketing. Coreyman says, what about phase change thermal pads? They don't need to be replaced. Well, you know, I don't use phase change thermal pads. I've been in this business for 35 years, and never once have I ever had any use case scenario for phase change thermal pads. To me, so my opinion on this is that enthusiasts care about nonsense. A lot of enthusiasts care about things that don't matter. Like the gist of what kind of shoelaces do I wear? Well, if you get these shoelaces, they don't untie as easily because of the material that they're made from. Who cares? Sometimes enthusiasts, they care about such little tiny minutiae and details that if it really mattered, none of these computers in the world would be working except for the few enthusiasts that knew better. But these enthusiasts, they're making improvements that never needed to be made. They're doing work that doesn't need to be done because corporate America is operating every day in much bigger scale than there are enthusiasts, and they don't ever do this work. Never, ever, never. So if I was working at Intel when I was, at no point could I change thermal paste. I was neither authorized, nor was I given the tools or the paste, or in this case, a phase change thermal pad. That is not the tool of a professional computer technician. In my experience, doesn't do that. Only enthusiasts do that. Or people that are like research and developer, you know, they're doing some kind of research and they're pushing the technology, then they have that money and that expense, you know, to spend for stuff like that for scientific research purposes. Oh, and Mara says we've got a couple emails. Right on. Now, if you're replacing the thermal material on a video card, and that video card has the phase change material, and you want to replace it with what was there, I understand, but I've never done that in my entire career. I've never changed the thermal paste on a video card. Never. Never needed to. It's all psychological. I don't know why people think it's the power of the influencers is fascinating. Because damn be the facts. If you want to see something because you want to see it, then you're going to see it. And people argue with me. And I'm saying, prove it. I'm saying, you show me where changing that thermal pad made a difference. And it wasn't you dusting the fans. Trust me, dusting the fans makes a difference. Clearing out the heat sinks and any blockages on the heat sinks makes a huge difference. Thermal paste almost never makes any difference unless the machine's very, very, very old. In which case, of course, it's old. You're going to have a lot more problems than just that. But even then, we're talking 10 plus years. It's like ridiculous. So then I'm not surprised. I'm surprised you're still using it. But to each their own. You know, we don't do that in corporate America. And if we did, you definitely don't touch it. Never, under any circumstances, unless you have written authorization from somebody that has the proper authority to allow you to touch that old machine, because if it's old, it's important and they can't replace it. So you don't touch it. You stay the hell away from it. Two very different worlds between working for a living and playing at your house. And I'm not saying playing at your house is bad. It's sort of like being in the military and living alone at home. If you live alone at home and you want to sleep in. Nobody cares. You don't want to make your bed today? Don't make it. That ain't going to fly if you're in the military. All right, let's see. What do we have? Oh. He says, here you go. Thomas's gift reminded me. And he sends an equivalent Amazon gift card. Again, very generous. And this comes from, it just says Bill. I don't know which Bill. Well, whoever you are, Bill, I know you're in the live chat, right? Thank you. It's a very generous contribution. And these Amazon gift cards are what we're going to use to buy some other future tech thing to put here on the bench for a future video. That's where the money goes. We're spending it on Amazon anyway. So thank you for that. And a PayPal contribution from Frankie B. Again with Frankie. Frankie, you're such a generous, nice person. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you something. You're all amazing, and I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. And I just can't get over, we have we're very fortunate to have a certain number of folks here in our community that are supporting us in such a generous way. I just want to call that out because it's very unexpected to happen once, let alone to happen multiple times from the same person. And, you know, let's face it, any contribution at all, or even your membership, is greatly appreciated because the vast majority of our viewers won't pay 1 penny. Now, I don't know why, whether it's they don't have 1 penny or they just don't believe they should have to pay for it. And if that was all we had, we would not exist anymore. So I cannot tell you how meaningful, what this means to me, to see the generosity and the number of members that we have that continue to renew. Some are at 50 months of continuous monthly renewals. And if you're wondering, you know, how can Carey do this? It's because of our community. And so when members of that community step so far above and beyond, like Buster or Frankie B, and you know, just today with Bill and Thomas with Mortant, I don't know the words. If there was ever anything to make Carey shut up, tell me to express my gratitude at the extreme generosity and support of a very minority amount of people that are, of the total that watch our videos, that support it, that make these videos possible. I can't thank you enough. NWO Style for Life said, is there any real world benefit of Cat 6 cables versus Cat 5e? Well, there can be if your if you want to make your network speeds faster. So here, for example, we upgraded to 10 gig networking, but we can't get 10 gig networking wirelessly. We'd have to have a wire to do that. And with Cat 5e, you're probably not going to get there. You're going to need to use Cat 6a. Even Cat 6 probably won't carry 10 gigs of data throughput. So that means you need a 10 gig switch, and you need computers that'll be 10 gig on each side to achieve 10 gig. And even then, your storage has to be fast enough to keep up with that too. So yes, Cat 6, Cat 7, Cat 8 are there to handle bigger bandwidth issues, or to sort of future-proof you for a while. I don't think there'll ever be a Cat 9. Like, I think Cat 8 is the most they can possibly do with copper wires of that thickness, and that the technology will have to switch over to fiber, because we do have 25 gig networks, 50 gig, and 100 gig, and those will all be done through fiber optic cables. So likely, you're not really future-proofing yourself. People think they are by putting in overkill equipment that costs a lot of money. And I think for most consumers, you will likely go wireless than you will go 10 gig. And the wireless speeds keep getting better and better, stronger, better coverage, more reliable. And I do believe the future is in wireless. Your phone's already been wireless for how long? We forget. But there will come a point in time. I mean, right now, for example, our current Wi-Fi system can achieve 2.5 gigabits per second through the air. That's faster than a Cat 5 cable. It's 10 times faster than a Cat3 cable, and it's completely wireless. And most of you watching this probably only have 1 gig networking in your router. Ours has 10, so it operating at 2.5 is no sweat, doesn't even notice it. So when I do an internet speed test, I also have multi-gig internet. It just happens to also be 2.5 gig. So when I do a speed test, I get 2,500 megabits per second download, and I think we get about 140 upload. To broadcast, I need about 40 kilobits per second, 40,000 kilobits per second, or 40 megabits, 40 megabytes. I can't remember. It's got to be megabytes. Otherwise, it won't make sense otherwise. To broadcast this live in 4K. So the fact that I have 130, 140 gives me a lot of overhead for glitches in the system, or other people in the building to also be uploading things without it affecting me. If I drop to 1080, I only need about 8,000 kilobits per second. Or 8 megabits per second. Just divide it by 10. It's close enough. So in general, depending on what you need and how you want to use it, will determine which cables you need. And the cables will be based on what equipment you have or plan to buy. Because whatever thing in the chain is the weakest link, the rest of the chain is just as weak. It's going to break at the same point. Until you replace the weakest link, then it doesn't matter how strong the rest of the chain is. So if we want to go 10 gig, we need everything. We need at least 2 computers. It wouldn't make sense for 1 computer to have 10 gig. And then in big corporations where they have thousands of employees, there's a lot of data going in and out constantly throughout the day. 100 gig is not uncommon anymore. And that's all done fiber optically. So it'll be interesting to see these people that wired up their homes with like Cat8 cables, if they ever live long enough to use them, or whether or not they live long enough to, well, much like telephone cables, this house used to have telephone lines from the telephone company. Those have been cut, the wire shoved in the wall, and the hole patched, and then taped and painted, or textured and painted, and you'll never know that damn near every room in this place had a hole in the wall with a telephone jack. We'll never go back to that. That's done. So instead of just covering up, I could put a plate. I said, well, we're having the construction done anyway, so just go ahead and treat that like a hole in the drywall that's not supposed to be there. Patch it, tape it, texture it, and paint it so we never know it was there, and we don't miss them. Good riddance. And I think wired networking is going to go that way. Everything's going to go wireless. And I do think wireless will exceed the physics of wires. The physics of glass or fiber optic, that's a whole different game. However, it's right now very expensive for any home user to do that. And likely you wouldn't have much in the way of equipment anyway, unless you're buying corporate level equipment, enterprise grade equipment, which is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'd say just get what you need. And if I was going to put in new cabling today, I would put in Cat 6A. I would not put in Cat 7 or Cat 8. I don't see any ever reason that I would ever go to that. And by the time I step up from what's the next thing above Cat 6A, it's probably going to be a wireless that's faster than 10 gig or equal to, or it's going to be fiber optics when they become cheaper and more ubiquitous where everybody's got them. So whichever happens first. But that's my opinion on it. But every cable I use now, like if I take this cable, for example, where is it? And we take a look at the writing on it. Usually it says, yeah, so there's writing on this cable. Let me bring it up to you. Now, since the network wirelessly is 2.5 gig, but wired is 10 gig, assuming the computer I'm on is 10 gig and the computer I'm getting files from, or the NAS, is also 10 gig. I made it a point to replace all my Cat 6 cables with Cat 6A, and these are the really thin cables. And I don't know if you can read the writing on this cable. I can barely read it, but I do believe this should say somewhere says pure copper, patch cord. This is going to be on all your Ethernet cables, by the way. You may not have noticed it. It'll tell you what they are. And if you're just running a gigabit network, you're probably fine. You know, Cat 5. Yeah, there it is right there, it should say. Where is it? It should say Cat 6A on there. Can't really see too well. Do you guys see it? So I have 6A for that reason. And then I just took all my category 5 cables and I threw them in the recycle bin because I never want to use them again. I don't want to have a big box of cables that I have to dig through and go, well, that one's Cat 5 and that's Cat 5E and this is 6, this is 6A. No, these are so cheap. These are cheaper than what the older, thicker, slower cables cost. That's the progress of technology. And these are backwards compatible. So any customer that only needs Cat 5, I'm still going to use a 6A cable because that's all I own anymore. All the Cat 5 cables are, well, most of them are gone. I think I still have a couple around here for like the really long cables. I've got like a 100-footer. I'm sure that's a Cat 5 cable or Cat 5E. But it was also pricey because it was 100 feet long. It's not as cheap to replace are these little ones. And I usually buy these in packs of 10. And, you know, I'll get 10-footers, I'll get 5-footers. I get 1-foot cables just for patching into a server room. And they're all 6A, so I just can reach into the box for the length I need. And I don't have to worry about what the version is. Because none of my customers need a cable this fast. But I do. And since I need them, I just go ahead and replenish my stock with the most common lengths I need, which are, again, probably 1-footers, 5-footers, 10 to 14 feet, whatever is available. And I try and get them all in the same color because I don't want the rainbow of colors. I want all my cables to be consistently the same color, just for the aesthetic. When you walk into the server room and you see these, you know, dozen 1-foot cables or 2 dozen of them, they all aligned and look pretty. Sometimes when I want to order the cables, they don't have the color I want. Then I have the decision to make, do I want to just find it somewhere else? Because I generally order these off Amazon. Or do I want to wait and just check back the inventory next few days and see if they replenish them? So, and then they have a variety pack also where they have a rainbow, like buying a box of crayons, and you'll get so many of this color and so many of that color. So if you want to have a complicated setup where you're like, all right, all my uplink cables are yellow and all of my patch cables are blue and all of my output cables are black, and that's up to you. I mean, that's what they make labels for, but, you know, to each their own. If you notice, what you might have seen a detail whenever I'm plugging in my HDMI cables. I take a zip tie, just a normal ordinary nylon zip tie, and I tie it around the cable. That's cable 1. I take 2 zip ties and I tie them towards the end of the cable. 2 zip ties. They're not connected to anything. They just wrap around the cable and I cut them. It's a little bracelet. This one will have 2 bracelets. That's cable number 2 that goes into port 2. Guess what I do with port 3? I have 3 cable ties, and then out wears 3 bracelets, and I know that's cable number 3. Those labels are never coming off, and the color coding, I don't have to worry about somebody who's colorblind. I can go in there and I can. Now look, if you've got 27 cables, I'm not going to put 27 bracelets on this thing. I'll go to the labels. But even then, the labels I'll use are also zip ties. And they're zip ties that have a little writable tag on the end of them. And you can write on them, like when you buy bulk goods at the grocery store, the market, and you have the scooper and you fill it. And then when you need to pay for it, they go, what's the item number? You're supposed to write that down. That's usually on the little tag. There's a little place for you to write down the number. So when you take it up to the register, you can look up the item to be charged by the pound for however much you put in the bag. kind of like that. It's a zip tie that goes around the cable with a tag on it. Then of course there's always stickers. You can buy sticker sets specifically for network cables where it's just a sticker book of 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s, and there'll be like a strip that you can wrap around the cable or an individual number that you can stick onto the outlet or the jack. So that way you can align cable 2 with port 2, just depending on how strict you want to be about your labeling.
Yeah.
And Mara says we have another email. Thank you, Mara. Mark Gaines with an Amazon gift card. Mark is watching us from Northern Ireland and is a regular member of our community here. And he said this is a little support for the channel. And again, a very generous Amazon gift card. You guys are amazing. I just wish there was something on Amazon I wanted to buy right now. And unfortunately, you know, with the technology stalling, we're just sort of hoarding the money right now. It's just a matter of time before some exciting mini PC or NAS or I don't know, something comes out. We do have a couple of Kickstarter items that we ordered. That's obviously not from Amazon. One is the Comet Q from GLI Net, and the other is the Cyped Nano, what do they call it? I've already forgotten. But they're competing products. It's like Coke and Pepsi. The Cyped, in my opinion, is a better value for the money. It's half the size, half the price. It does twice as much. But it doesn't mean the GLI Net is bad. It's only bad if you compare it to the Nano from Cyped. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, those should be shipping anytime now. So we should have them, I would guess, by no later than this time next month. I would even say sooner than that, maybe within 2 to 3 weeks from now. And as they arrive, we will unbox them and do a live review on how they work. But it's just an internet-based KVM that allows us remote access. And these devices allow remote access to phones. It's a single USB-C cable, that's all it is. So if you don't have video output on USB-C, you won't get any video. But on a Mac or on a cell phone, you absolutely will get video. And on many PCs or even desktops now, they do include DisplayPort out on USB-C. In which case, it's wireless. You just plug a USB-C cable in and you're hooked up, you're done. And you can have access to that computer from anywhere in the world. It's pretty damn cool. No software is involved. So I'm excited to get those because we've already reviewed many of the other KVMs and I love them. I mean, it's changed my workflow so much better than it used to be. I don't know. I never want to go without one now. And I know, whether or not that has any value to you, I don't know. But for me, wow, this is a major breakthrough for me. NWO Style says, is it still worth buying bulk cabling with plugs to terminate by yourself or with Amazon and you right size your cabling without the fuss? In general, I think making your own cables is sort of like rolling your own cigarettes. It's sort of an old-timey thing to do. These cables are so thin, I don't know if you noticed, you couldn't make this cable if you tried. The wires inside of here are so thin, human fingers can't put this together. A machine has to do this. And when you make cables yourself, you're prone to making errors or crimping problems or forgetting to put the hood on and you're, oh, I gotta cut it and do it again. It's depending on who's paying you to make those cables. If they find out they could buy the cables pre-made and not have to pay you, it'd probably save them a lot of money and they'll end up with better cables. Also, when people make their own cables, they generally use the wrong cable more often than not. You see, there's solid cable and there's stranded cable. So stranded wire is a bunch of wires wound together and twisted. And when you have a cable that needs to be flexible like this, you want stranded cable. And they're very difficult to put ends on stranded cables. But when you're running a cable in the wall, and it's not going to be all twisted up like this, and it's not going to get moved, it's going to be run one time, one route, up a wall, across the ceiling, down another wall, then you want solid core cable. And then you also have to worry about the insulation material, because if you're in an office building or a home, you may need to use plenum or non-plenum cable depending on the budget. And what that refers to is whether or not when this catches fire, if it releases toxic smoke. And in some cases, it's against the law to install the wrong cable. It violates codes, building construction codes, and individual building policies, depending on the company. So basically, imagine the building was on fire and you're away from the fire, but you pass out because you're not getting any oxygen. It's because the network cabling is toxic when it catches fire, and now you die in the fire. And those cables do cost a bit more, but you know, what are you going to do? Risk your life and the life of everybody in the building instead of spending the extra couple bucks. So you want patch cables to be made of a flexible stranded wire that can be twisted around and unplugged and moved around. And you want wires that are permanently in the walls to be solid core wire. Wish Lab said, did you see the packet capture analysis of the various KVM solutions out there? I think it was somebody that did packet captures. Saipede had a few things to fix. That was like 2 years ago. That's all been addressed. I think you're watching an old video. All that stuff is open source. You can look at the code. There's no reason you have to look at the results. If you could just look at the code, you already know what the results are going to be. And when Saipede first came out, there were some questionable things. There was no ill intent. And so people being paranoid and throwing people under the bus and demonizing companies, I find no respect from people who do that to others. I think if you take the time to understand why things are there and you realize there's no nefarious intention and that your imagination is the problem, then maybe it's best if you just don't buy those products. Just stay away from them. If that's your mentality, I can't strongly recommend enough you just get away from electronics. Almost everything electronic is made in China. I don't care what it is. If you think, well, it's made in China, so I have to be afraid of it, then everything that plugs in your house, you should be afraid of. Whether it's a lamp, an appliance, it's pretty much, with few exceptions, made in China. The iPhone you trust may have been made in China. I know they moved manufacturing, but nonetheless. This sort of very anti-Chinese is something future generations are going to go, God, you guys were racist. I already see it. What was wrong with you back then? Why would you do that? That was their culture at the time. You look at what we did in the 70s and you go, how could you guys do that? How could you talk to people that way? You know, there's cartoons I grew up with in the 1970s that were made in the 1950s, you know, Warner Brothers cartoons that they won't show anymore because they're not culturally acceptable. And I think this attitude against going after these Chinese companies with such vigor and venom, I'm not proud of people that do that. It's just a lack of understanding. And again, the code is all open source, so it's there for you to see it. So if you don't like that, or if that's your thing, start without me. I'm not interested in joining that cult. But there was some concerns legitimately early on. And there was a misunderstanding. There was a misunderstanding between the engineers at Saipede and then the American and European cultures that they were selling to. So they had a little bit of a learning curve, but then so did we. So we kind of realized where each other's miscommunication was and where their misunderstanding was, and they corrected that. That was never done on purpose. It was just a cultural difference. But again, if it bothers you, don't buy it. I'm not suggesting you should. In fact, if that's what you're interested in, I'd suggest you stay far away from any KVM. They're just not for you. But that's how I would deal with it. Some people, they just look for an excuse. And if that's what you're doing and you're looking for it, you'll find it if you search for it. You'll find exactly what you want to see. But the reality is, these products wouldn't exist if they were nefarious. They would be exposed, and there'd be no pushback from me. But people using their imagination and playing hypotheses, I've got work to do, so I don't worry about that stuff. Again, I think a lot of what your information is coming from is out of date. But I can only speculate. VX wants to know if the length of an Ethernet cable can affect speed very much. It mostly affects latency, but overall, you can get out of an average Cat5 or Cat6 cable, you can get 100 meters out of one of these bad boys. So about 330 feet. After that, you'll start losing signal. The impedance grows, and the signal will start getting weaker and weaker. There's not enough power going. Now, these really thin ones, they can go about 35 feet. That's about it. And they do power over Ethernet just fine. There's no difference. The only thing is they're not very shielded. So if you've got a lot of interference in your area or a lot of other electronic items, these thin cables without the additional shielding could pose a problem. But that's so unusual to find outside of a corporate environment. It's never once affected me. And I have the really thin HDMI cables under the same circumstances where, again, they don't have as much shielding on them. So if you're in an environment that has a lot of electrical or RF interference, which again, most homes don't, then you can use these thinner, lighter, more flexible cables, which I prefer. And if you do need the additional shielding, you end up with a thicker, less flexible cable. And those are normally used in outdoor use case scenarios, but I have seen scenarios indoors where somebody's got a lab with just electronics everywhere. And you want to talk about worrying about getting cancer. I'm not so much worried about the shielding on the cable as somebody around that every day for 10 hours a day for years. I would not be surprised if there was a cancer or a medical condition from surrounding yourself with that much radio frequency, being bombarded by it that heavily over a very long period of time could have negative health effects. I'm not a doctor, but I would not be surprised. Anything that's so extreme that you're around it all the time, every day for hours and hours and hours, probably going to have a negative consequence. If I worked outdoors in the sun, melanoma is probably in my future. If I did that, every single day for hours a day. Otherwise, if I'm just going outside now and again, it's probably not so much of a concern. And I would be focusing on my health more than worrying about the data transmission speed of the cable. In an environment where you need more than 330 feet, excuse me, then you'd need to use repeaters and things of that nature. But they are designed to run at the rated speed of the cable at the rated length. If you take it beyond that, your results may be inconsistent or unreliable. Doesn't mean that the minute you go to 335 feet, suddenly it doesn't work. Might still kind of work. It might work just fine. It might sometimes work. All of your reliability and everything you're depending on now are a roll of the dice. It might work for a while until it doesn't. It's too much of a risk for corporate America, certainly. And for any home user that needs a cable more than 335 or 330 feet long, I'd love to see your house. It sounds like a mansion. And again, you could avoid that even with a mansion by having a central location that all the cables terminate to, that you're not going from one end of the house to the other end of the house, but rather all going towards the center. So that's all stuff we consider when we're designing the networking in a building, is where are we going to put the server? And generally, you don't want the server like up against a window where the window could break and someone could steal it, or tree could fall through and, I don't know, be a hurricane in Florida and you have a window there and the hurricane smashes the window in and floods the server. We want the server moved more inwards, away from the edges of the building. You got to think of stuff like this. And if a customer says, I don't care, I want it near the window because it's the only place I have for it, then when the hurricane smashes the window and floods a server room, you say, well, we tried to warn you, but they don't want to listen. So your business is down. We'll have to replace the server. And if you still want us to put a server back in this room, we got to replace the window. We got to dry and do mold remediation out of the room. And then we can come back in and put the server in. And you're going to be down for a while. Or move the server more towards the inside of the building. So this is the kind of stuff we deal with all the time. And home users, they generally don't care about placement. It's wherever the cable company punched a hole in the wall by the TV, the main TV. That's usually where the modem or the router goes. And it's oftentimes, it's not uncommon for that to be at one opposite end of the house. and they have Wi-Fi issues with the stock ISP router getting a strong enough signal to certain side, upstairs or downstairs or other side of the house, because they didn't put it in centrally. The cable providers don't care. They say where you want it. That's it. And you say, well, the big TV is here in the living room, so we want it there. Well, guess what? That's where they're going to put your modem. Now, I'm pretty lucky that in the home designs here in Arizona, the living room of the homes are mostly in the middle of the house. So when the cable companies punch a hole through the wall to put their cable in, it's pretty well centered, right? The living room is generally centered in Arizona designed homes, where you've got a kitchen on one side and bedrooms on the other, or even maybe an upstairs. There's almost no basements in Phoenix. There's a few exceptions, but mostly people don't have them here. So that's not an issue. And then there's usually not any lofts or anything. If you have a second floor, it's a standard constructed second floor, not a converted attic. Because there's no AC up there. You'd probably die of heat stroke. Anyway, those are all things we keep in mind. And let's see. Rich Lab said he's got the GLI Comet. He's been enjoying it. I have no problem with the Comet, except it's too large, it's too expensive, and it requires too many cables. The SiPede Nano or Nano KVM Pro is smaller, cheaper, does more, has more storage, and I did mention it costs less. So I prefer it. But if I didn't have it, I wouldn't know better, and I'd be just happy not knowing better using the Comet. The Comet requires 4 cables. Drives me crazy. The Nano only requires 3. The Nano Pro only requires 2, and the new Nano only requires 1. I just want to plug it in and go. So that's my emphasis, is on how many cables do I have to plug in. And their Comet devices, all the GLI Net devices, all require 3 or 4 cables to work, versus the new one that's coming out, much like SiPede, they're both about the size of a wristwatch. And they have one USB-C cable that's permanently attached. So you just unfold it and plug it in to a phone or plug it into a mini PC. As long as that display port functions through the USB-C port, that's all you need. Connect it to your network wirelessly, and then configure it for both internal or external access. So I'm really looking forward to receiving them. I have no doubt the Comet's fine, but the Comet is twice the money and twice the size. It's also not as flexible. It doesn't do as much. So, to each their own. It's just my preference, that's all. I have nothing against GLI Net. I would like to pay a better, more competitive price, but the single most expensive KVMs on the market are made by GLI Net, and they're not better. They're not bad, but they're not better. And I would argue SiPedes are better. They're smaller, they're faster, they're cheaper. They do more. The built-in memory on the SiPede is far greater than the built-in memory. Anyway, you decide for yourself. But I'm not against GLI Net at all. I just wish that if they're not going to be as good as SiPede, as far as all the features and size and all the other thing, then they should be cheaper. But they're more expensive. They're the most expensive out of all of them. Nobody's more money than GLI Net. When you compare SiPede and you compare Arc KVM or Pico KVM, they're all cheaper. Only the Pi KVM, the original, is like $400. That's ridiculous, but I don't even use those. I'm talking about this latest generation. On this latest generation of KVMs, nobody is physically larger, nobody requires as many cables, and nobody costs as much as GLI Net. That doesn't mean the product's bad. It just means, why would I spend that much and be that inconvenienced when I could have something half the size at half the price? And it does more. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Andy says he loves his SiPede Nano KVM Desk Pro Wi-Fi. Yeah, you and me both. I mean, that's my go-to. I've got one of everything, of all the KVMs. The question is, which one do you use? Well, I'm using the Jet KVM a lot, but sometimes I don't want to plug that third cable in. And the Nano KVM also has my utilities flash drive built right into it, where the Jet KVM doesn't. So if I want to run my utilities, I don't have to then plug in a flash drive. So that's already built into the spare storage on the Nano KVM Pro, and I only need to hook up 2 cables on the Nano KVM Pro, just HDMI and USB. It's going to get power from the USB, and it's going to get internet access from the Wi-Fi that's pre-configured. I don't have to set it up every time. It remembers the setting no matter how long I have it unplugged. As soon as I plug it in, it's ready to go. So for my needs, my purposes, my budget, my requirements, SiPeD's untouchable. But that doesn't mean that the GLI-Net stuff is bad. It's just value for the money. I think there's better value away from GLI-Net, but the product works fine. Okay, any other questions for me? Again, I'm happy to do my best to provide the answers, or at least my opinions. You know, some of this stuff doesn't really have right or wrong answers. It's just preferences. So anyway, we do have the KVMs coming in. I think GLI-Net and SiPeD will ship pretty close. I think once we get one, it will only be a matter of days before we get the other one. They both appear to be aggressively trying to ship first, and we'll see which one happens first. And they don't talk about each other, by the way. They act like they're the only ones in the market. But what they're doing is they're very clearly competing on price and availability. So we'll see which one comes first. And that'll be the first one we review. But the second one won't be far behind. That much I can tell you. So despite the fact they don't talk about it, they're very aware of each other. Krish Lab said the problem is a lot of KVM devices are used in laptop farms with illegal employment. Well, I mean, if you've ever witnessed that yourself, I'd be interested in hearing, but I think you're reading news stories about planes that crash, and now you're worried about flying in a plane when the odds of that are very, very low. So it's not to say that these things aren't done. Of course they are, but they don't affect you or I, and it's not our job. We're not in law enforcement. And furthermore, it's not as common as the news would make it out to be. So they find one, and now you think they're everywhere. It's just not how it works. But if you ever encounter that in real life, do me a favor and take a picture of it and send it to me so I believe you. Because I think you're just living vicariously online. But when you step outside in the real world, you'll likely never encounter that. Very, very unlikely. It's very, very rare. But prove me wrong. But don't get too wound up because of an article. I mean, that's ridiculous. They wrote an article about something because it was more likely going to get clicked on, right? If you're watching a movie and it's about somebody that does something and you're like, oh, there's no way that person could have done that. That's why they made a movie about them and not you, because they did something nobody else has ever done before, right? That's the whole point of making the movie, is look at how special this person is. Look at how they did it. And even if it's fiction, even if it's John Wick, the idea is that you go, oh, nobody would survive that. Okay, but according to the fiction, he does survive that, and that's why he's worthy of making a movie about him, because of just how special he is. You know, there's plenty of people that know Kung Fu, but there's a reason why Bruce Lee was the subject of so many Kung Fu movies and demonstrations, is he excelled at it much better than the average Kung Fu artist, right? And so when somebody is exceptional, it makes sense for the media to focus attention on them. So in the same point, the media stories about these KVMs are exceptional, meaning they're not common and nothing to worry about. And if it's not in your line of work, it's not for your, it's just there for entertainment purposes. This news that you're reading is there to entertain you. It's not educating you. It's law enforcement knows a lot more about this and the reality and scale and size of it. And they're the ones whose responsibility is to enforce the law. So don't worry about what anybody else is doing unless it's your job. That's the best advice I can give you. And just because something happens somewhere doesn't mean that's something you need to be worried about. You know, these divers in the Philippines or Thailand, they get stuck in these caves all the time. I've never met anybody stuck in a cave ever in my life. I don't know anybody who got stuck in a cave. I don't live in that area of the country. And even if I did, I probably don't have any friends that go spelunking. So I don't know. But it doesn't affect me any more than, you know, there's some disease going around with rabbits. I don't have any rabbits. So what do I care? And it's happening on the East Coast. And I'm just making all this up as an extreme example of how disconnected from reality it is, because I'm not affected by it. I'm nowhere near the place. Even if I was, I wouldn't be going around petting the rabbits. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Unless it affects you or it is in your direct reality, it's just entertainment. That's all it is. And you clicked on it. And that's why it works. But, you know, again, if you feel that way, then I would strongly advise you don't buy one. Just don't buy one. You'll be happy, I'll be happy, and then you don't have to worry about it. The rest of us who buy them, we don't worry about it, and that's the only difference between us. You're worried about something that the rest of us are saying it's preposterous and absurd to worry about that. And furthermore, if I were to see any negative experiences as a result, because we're in an independent channel, I don't have a dog in the race to defend these companies or to accuse these companies, but I feel it's a moral and ethical obligation to be honest. And when people bring up these bizarre, you know, stories, I'm like, okay, what happened to one person one time in some other place on the world, and I'm worried about it happening to me? Come on. It's just not grounded, in my opinion. But I'm not going to tell you what to think. I will just agree to disagree, and I'll strongly advise you stay away from it if you feel that way. No, I'm not trying to sell you one. I don't care if you buy one or you don't. But if you're predispositioned to be paranoid, probably best to stay away from it. But anyway, with that, I don't see any other questions, so I think that'll wrap it up for us for today. And again, not sure what's going on Friday, but we will be back here on Friday at 1 o'clock, the usual time. And we certainly hope you'll join us then and bring your questions and love the interaction. Even if we share different values and different concerns, that's okay. I'm totally fine with that. And I'll just be honest with you that something that you're not fine with, that I think is ridiculous and I'm fine with it, it goes both ways. I can respect it and advise you to stay away from it. If it bothers you, make your own or don't use one, right? If I don't like the gas station, I won't go to the gas station. Or I'll build my own gas station. That's all I'm saying. I'm not entitled to anything, you know, other than my rights as an American. I'm not entitled to tell people what prices should be or what availability should be, and I'm okay with that. I vote with my money and what I choose to buy, and you vote with your money and what you choose to buy. But I'll let law enforcement do their job, and I'll let the politicians do their job, and then I'm going to focus on my job, and I would hope you focus on your job. And then everything should roll much smoother than having too many cooks in the kitchen when half of them aren't even cooks. You know, get out of the kitchen. You're just crowding the place up. But with that, thank you guys again for hanging out. And again, I really enjoy hanging out and having these conversations and then sharing these basic steps, which to me are basic, but might be eye-opening for you, or might give you a reason to just check what you've got. If you haven't checked it in a while and you forgot, it's a nice reminder. Again, if you have auto updates turned on, how do you know it's auto updating? If you don't check it, I guess you work on a faith system. Computers don't work on faith. I'll tell you right now, they will never work on faith. And the minute you entrust it is when it's going to stab you in the back. So it's been that way since my very first computer, and it's never changed. Most of the time when I do auditing, everything's working like it should. But all it takes is once, and trust me, with the scale of computers and routers that I maintain, once happens quite often. A client wasn't getting the latest firmware updates on their NAS, even though they had auto updates turned on, they weren't coming in. Another client had an ASUS router, I think this exact same one, and its BIOS firmware was out of date. But auto updates were turned on, but for some reason wasn't grabbing it. I don't know why. So I did it myself, and I do it at night when the office is closed. People in the office don't even know I did anything. And I will, from time to time, log in and check the NAS operating system version. I will check the router. I make sure Windows is up to date, Malwarebytes is up to date, delete the temp files. All these maintenance tasks so that we don't deal with the problems. And the problems that we do deal with, there's only so much we can do to try to prevent them. You're still going to get problems from time to time for various reasons, but the amount of times people need to call me for support based on the maintenance I'm doing is far less than if I wasn't doing the maintenance. If we waited until something broke to fix it, man, I don't want that stress in my life. I don't want it. Let's just do basic maintenance. And then the odds and frequency of that kind of stress happening is significantly reduced. Not eliminated, but I mean significantly reduced. So use that information, take it how you will. But that's what motivates me, is to keep problems from happening. And it's a very difficult thing to tell a customer that. They say, what did you do? And you say, well, I updated this and that. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you're more secure and you're safer and you're less likely going to have problems. So we were going to have problems? I don't know. But you're saying we're not going to have problems. No, I don't know that either. I'm saying you're less likely going to have the problems. Well, how likely of a difference does it make? I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know what your employees are going to click on. I don't know if the settings we've changed block the thing they've clicked on from activating. We just wait and see, and then we'll adjust if we need to. But that's what works for me. And yeah, sometimes we make some adjustments, right? Once a customer exhibits a certain pattern of behavior that other customers don't do, we make certain adjustments just for them. But otherwise, we do our best to sort of preempt these problems from occurring by staying on top of everything and verifying software is being updated, Chrome is being updated, Microsoft Office is being updated, Windows is being updated. Any piece of software that client runs, we always click help and check for updates at least twice a year. In Windows, I do that monthly. I check it for updates, even though it's set to automatic updates. The backups, I make sure the backups are running, and I do run a manual backup at least once a month, just to make sure everything's working automatically like it should. So all of that is just the babysitting, the auditing that gives me peace of mind that I can tell my clients with confidence that I'm not BSing, that everything is current, and the likelihood of you having a problem is at the lowest point we can get it. Aside from unplugging everything and taking it offline, this is as safe as we can make it. And because new threats are coming out all the time, and because the automatic updates usually they work, but sometimes they don't, we have to keep checking on a somewhat regular basis, depending on what it is and how important it is, right? How often you check is up to you. But if you never check it, well, you're just waiting for a surprise one day, and that's fine with me. As long as I'm not involved, enjoy your surprise. Or, of course, you can always ask for help. We're always happy to help you. So thank you again. Thank you, Tamara, our channel administrator, for the thumbnail creation and all the video notes that she's updated today. She's also the one that answers the emails. And I want to shout out a thank you to the generosity from so many members today. I see contributions from Mortant and Bill and Frankie B and Mark Gaines, and of course our good friend Buster. I can't thank you guys enough for that. Oh, it looks like my client with the power problem reached out. It said the computer stopped the clock stopped at 3:09 a.m. That's funny because I had logged in and checked at about 3 a.m. and it was fine. I'm starting to wonder if this client may have some memory going bad. That's not something I can really check remotely. I'll have to go over there and put a memtest86 in there because I cleared out the temp files and I updated the video driver, and the other computers in the office are the exact same configuration, the exact same hardware. So what's different about this computer? Why is that one freezing and nobody else is freezing? Something's different. I'm starting to wonder if we maybe got a RAM module going bad. I don't know. I'll keep working on it, and feel free to follow up with me if ask me for an update on it. I'll probably look at it later tonight. Now I'm sorry, I checked the email. I thought everything was good. All right, well, that's okay. It's not a big deal. They hit reset and the system comes up and it works. It's only when it sits idling it's causing this problem, so I'll have to dig in a little bit more. But I'll let you know. That's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to everybody for your support, your contributions, your friendliness here in the chat room. All of our friends in green, I can't thank you enough for your support. And everyone just hanging out with us, being a part of the community. We love having you here, and we hope you'll return here on Friday when we're back live again for another live show. Hope to see you then, and thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.